Caleb Ward had half a second to choose. Let the billionaire heiress drink poison or destroy both their lives in front of 200 witnesses. He chose chaos. The kiss was brutal, desperate, champagne flooding between their mouths as Lena Fairmont's eyes went wide with shock and fury. The crystal flute shattered against marble. Then his lips started blistering. The Cartwright ballroom, glittering with old money and older secrets, went silent as Caleb's knees buckled, and Lena realized the quiet driver who'd just assaulted her had also saved her life. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The thing about working security for people who could buy small countries was that you learned to see threats in the shape of a shoulder, the angle of a tray, the half-second pause before a smile. Caleb Ward had spent 12 years in the Secret Service reading rooms like other men read newspapers, and even 3 years removed from that life. 3 years of school pickups and parent-teacher conferences and learning to braid hair from YouTube videos, the instincts didn't fade. They just got quieter, like scar tissue over a wound that never quite healed. Tonight, standing in his driver's uniform against the east wall of the Cartwright Foundation's annual charity gala, those instincts were screaming. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors so polished you could see your soul reflected back, assuming you still had one after enough years in rooms like this. Women in gowns that cost more than Caleb's annual salary drifted past like exotic birds, their laughter carefully calibrated to sound spontaneous. Men in tuxedos that actually fit discussed mergers and acquisitions with the casual intimacy other people reserved for talking about the weather. Caleb's jaw tightened as he scanned the crowd for the 100th time. His assignment was simple: drive Lena Fairmont to the gala, wait, drive her home. Edmund Cartwright himself had requested Caleb specifically from the luxury car service. Someone discreet, he'd said, which in rich people speak meant someone who knew how to be invisible. Caleb had perfected invisible. He'd built a whole life out of it. "Daddy's gonna be so late picking me up," a small voice echoed in his memory. Mia, this morning, clutching her backpack with both hands. At 7 years old, she'd already learned that sometimes grown-ups made promises they couldn't keep. That lesson had cost Caleb more than he could calculate. He pushed the thought away and focused on the room. There, near the auction tables, that was Lena Fairmont. 28 years old, fresh off inheriting Fairmont Industries after her father's sudden death 6 weeks ago. The business magazines had been savage. Heiress or liability? Can a gallery curator run a billion-dollar empire? Robert Fairmont's risky final gamble. She didn't look like a gamble. She looked exhausted. Even from across the ballroom, Caleb could read the tension in her shoulders, the way she held her champagne flute like a shield instead of an accessory. Her dress was midnight blue, elegant without being flashy, and she wore her dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested she'd had help but wished she hadn't needed it. She was beautiful in that particular way wealthy people were beautiful. Good bones and good lighting and the kind of posture that came from a childhood of riding lessons and finishing schools. But her eyes were wrong. They moved too quickly, landing on faces and sliding away like she was looking for exits instead of conversation partners. Caleb recognized that look. He'd worn it himself for the better part of 3 years. That's when he saw the waiter. The man moved through the crowd with the kind of efficiency that should have been unremarkable. Black vest, white shirt, silver tray balanced perfectly on one palm. But his shoulders were wrong, too rigid. Military posture trying to pass as service industry ease, and his eyes weren't tracking the room the way real waitstaff did, always watching for empty glasses and subtle signals. He was locked onto a single target: Lena Fairmont. Caleb's pulse kicked up. He straightened from his position against the wall, his driver's cap suddenly feeling like a costume that didn't fit right anymore. The waiter was closing in, weaving through clusters of conversation with practiced precision. On his tray, a single champagne flute sat among empty spaces, a fresh pour with a slight cloudiness to the liquid that could have been condensation, but probably wasn't. "Ms. Fairmont," the waiter said, his voice carrying just far enough for Caleb to catch. "Compliments of Mr. Cartwright, his private reserve." Caleb was moving before conscious thought caught up. 20 feet. The waiter was already extending the tray. Lena was reaching for the glass, her face arranging itself into the polite smile rich people wore when accepting things they didn't particularly want. 15 feet. Her fingers touched the stem. 10 feet. The glass was rising toward her lips, and Caleb could see it now, the faint separation in the liquid, oil, and water refusing to mix properly, no matter how much you stirred. 5 feet. He didn't have time to explain, didn't have time to be subtle or professional or anything except the weapon the Secret Service had spent 12 years sharpening. Caleb grabbed Lena's wrist with his left hand and yanked her toward him. Her gasp of shock cut through the ambient noise like breaking glass. His right hand went to the back of her head, fingers threading through carefully styled hair, and then he was kissing her with enough force to tilt her head back and enough desperation that champagne sloshed over the rim of the flute still caught between them. For one crystalline moment, the entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Lena Fairmont tasted like expensive lipstick in surprise. The champagne flooded between their lips, cold, bitter, and wrong. Caleb forced his mouth open wider, creating a seal, and drank. The liquid hit his tongue with a chemical burn that confirmed every instinct screaming in his head. He swallowed hard, taking as much as he could before Lena's free hand came up and slapped him across the face with enough force to make his ears ring. The champagne flute fell. Crystals shattered against marble with a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "What the hell?" Lena's voice was pure fury, but Caleb was already staggering backward, his hand going to his throat as the first wave of heat radiated from his stomach. The ballroom swam, faces turned toward him, mouths opening in shock or delight or concern. He couldn't tell anymore because his vision was starting to blur at the edges. "Security!" someone shouted. Caleb tried to speak, tried to warn her, but his lips were on fire. Actual fire. He touched them with shaking fingers and felt the skin already blistering, tissue damage spreading faster than should have been possible. His tongue felt swollen, his throat tightening with each breath. "Oh my God!" a woman gasped. "His face!" Lena was staring at him with an expression shifting rapidly from rage to horror. She looked down at the shattered glass, then back at Caleb as understanding started to dawn. "You—" But Caleb couldn't answer. His knees buckled. The marble floor rushed up to meet him, and the last thing he registered before darkness took him was the sound of Lena Fairmont screaming for help, and the sight of the waiter, the fake waiter, melting into the crowd like he'd never existed at all. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments, voices, urgent and overlapping, the chemical smell of a medical kit, something cool and wet pressed against his burning lips, and pain, a radiating, consuming heat that started in his mouth and throat and spread like poison through his entire system, which Caleb thought with the distant clarity of someone in shock was exactly what it was. Pulses thready, BP dropping. Need to get him to a hospital. Anyone see what happened? Did he drink something? Caleb forced his eyes open. He was lying on a leather couch in what looked like a private office. Wood-paneled walls, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the kind of space where important decisions got made behind closed doors. Someone had loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar. A woman in a server's uniform was holding an ice pack to his face, while a man in a tuxedo, a real guest judging by the Rolex, pressed a stethoscope to his chest. And standing 5 feet away, arms crossed and eyes blazing with barely contained emotion, was Lena Fairmont. "Everyone out," she said. Her voice had gone from shocked to commanding in the space between the ballroom and this room. "Now!" "Miss Fairmont, this man needs immediate medical attention. I said out." She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. There was steel underneath the cultured tones, the kind of authority that came from growing up knowing your name opened doors and your word ended arguments. "Send Edmund in, no one else, and someone find that waiter." The makeshift medical team exchanged glances but obeyed. Rich people didn't get told no, not even in emergencies. They filed out, and Lena locked the door behind them. Then she turned to Caleb, and he saw something in her face he hadn't expected. Not gratitude or concern, but a cold, calculating intelligence that reminded him unsettlingly of her father. "You have about 60 seconds before Edmund gets here," she said, moving closer. "So you're going to tell me exactly what the hell just happened and why my driver just kissed me in front of 200 people before collapsing like he'd been shot." Caleb tried to sit up. His body protested violently. "Poison," he managed, his voice coming out as a rasp. Every word felt like swallowing broken glass. The champagne. Cyanide, probably. Maybe ricin. Something fast-acting. Lena's face went pale. You're saying someone just tried to kill me? Yes. And you? You drank it instead. Most of it. Caleb touched his lips gingerly. The blistering had spread, angry welts forming across his mouth and chin. Enough to trigger symptoms. Not enough to kill me, probably. Depends on the dosage. Probably. Lena's laugh was sharp and humorless. That's reassuring. She paced to the window, her dress rustling like wings. When she turned back, her expression had shifted again, harder, more focused. Who are you? And don't say you're just a driver. Caleb closed his eyes. This was the conversation he'd been avoiding for 3 years. The one that led to questions he couldn't answer without unpacking a whole life he'd buried. But he was lying on a couch with poison eating through his system, and the woman in front of him had just become a target in a game that didn't forgive mistakes. Caleb Ward, he said quietly. Secret Service, Presidential Protective Division. Retired 3 years ago. Understanding flickered across her face. You were working tonight. Not driving. Protecting. No, I really am just a driver. The admission tasted like failure. I left the service after my wife died. Had to focus on raising my daughter. The car service was supposed to be simple, anonymous, safe. But you still see threats everywhere. When they're real, yes. Caleb forced himself to sit up fully, ignoring the way the room tilted. That waiter wasn't real staff. Wrong posture, wrong eye movement, wrong everything. And that champagne was specifically for you. Mr. Cartwright's private reserve, but Edmund Cartwright doesn't do public gestures like that. He's too paranoid about appearing to show favoritism. Lena stared at him for a long moment. Then she walked to a sideboard and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal tumbler. She downed it in one swallow, no hesitation, no wince, and poured another. My father died 6 weeks ago, she said, still facing away from him. Heart attack, they said. Sudden. Unexpected. He was 59 years old and ran marathons. She turned and Caleb saw the truth written in every line of her posture. You're thinking what I've been thinking, that it wasn't a heart attack at all. Before Caleb could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Lena, it's Edmund. Open up. Lena's jaw tightened, but she unlocked the door. Edmund Cartwright swept in like he owned the room, which, technically, he probably did. 70 years old, with the vigor of a man 20 years younger, he'd built his fortune in real estate and his reputation on being ruthlessly fair. He took one look at Caleb and went still. Jesus Christ, is that? Poison, Lena said flatly. Someone tried to kill me tonight, Edmund, in your ballroom, at your gala. Edmund's face hardened. Security is reviewing the footage now, but Lena, are you certain? This could have been what? A prank? Her voice rose. Look at his face, Edmund. Look at what that champagne did to him in seconds. If he hadn't stopped me, then you'd be dead. Edmund moved to the couch, studying Caleb with the assessing gaze of someone used to evaluating threats. Mr. Ward, I believe. I remember requesting you specifically. Clean record, discreet, former government service. His eyes narrowed. Secret Service? Caleb nodded, too tired to do anything else. Well, Edmund's expression shifted into something grimmer. That's an interesting coincidence. Lena, we need to contact the police. The FBI. This is attempted murder. No. Both men looked at her in surprise. Lena set down her whiskey glass with deliberate care. Think about it. Someone got close enough to serve me poisoned champagne at a vetted event with security at every entrance. That means they either had inside access or they're good enough to bypass your entire system. Either way, going public right now tells them we know, and we lose any advantage we might have. Lena, this is insane. My father's death is starting to look less like a heart attack and more like the first move in a very careful plan. She met Edmund's gaze steadily. I need to know who wanted him dead and why. I need to know who's coming for me, and I need to do it without spooking whoever's pulling the strings. Edmund looked like he wanted to argue, But something in Lena's expression stopped him. Instead, he turned to Caleb. You need a doctor, a real one. I know someone, Caleb said, the words scraping out. Ex-military. Treats field injuries, no questions asked. If you can get me to a phone, use mine. Lena pulled out her cell, unlocked it, and handed it over without hesitation. The trust implicit in that gesture, giving a stranger access to her personal device, told Caleb more about her character than an hour of conversation would have. He dialed from memory. 3 rings, then a familiar gruff voice. This better be good. Marcus, it's Caleb. I need a house call. Silence. Then, Ward? Hell, I thought you were dead. Or worse, happy. Poisoning. Probable cyanide or ricin. Oral exposure, maybe 20 milliliters. Symptoms started 15 minutes ago. The humor drained from Marcus's voice. You at a hospital? No, and I can't go to one. Of course you can't. A sigh. Give me an address. And Caleb? Don't die before I get there. I hate driving in Manhattan for nothing. 20 minutes later, Caleb was lying on the couch in Lena's penthouse apartment, while Marcus Chen worked with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd patched bullet wounds in desert compounds and knife injuries in embassy safe rooms. The army medic had aged since Caleb last saw him, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but his hands were as steady as ever. You're lucky, Marcus said, injecting something clear into Caleb's IV line. If this was cyanide, it was heavily diluted, enough to trigger symptoms, but not enough for lethal dose in your body weight. You'll feel like garbage for a few days, but you'll live. How reassuring, Caleb muttered. Whoever mixed this knew what they were doing. Marcus sat back, studying Caleb with clinical detachment. This wasn't meant to kill instantly, more like trigger a heart attack or stroke in someone with the right vulnerability. Make it look natural. Lena, who'd been watching from across the room with her arms wrapped around herself, spoke up. My father ran marathons. He was in perfect health, but they said his heart just stopped. Marcus glanced at her, then back at Caleb. You want to tell me what you've gotten yourself into? Honestly, I have no idea. Caleb closed his eyes. I was supposed to drive Miss Fairmont to a gala. That's it. Now I'm lying here with poison in my system and someone's trying to kill my passenger. Your ex-Secret Service instincts kicked in. Something like that. Idiot. But Marcus said it with grudging respect. He stood, packing his equipment with practiced efficiency. Keep the IV in for another hour. You're going to feel worse before you feel better. Nausea, muscle tremors, probably some lovely hallucinations. Don't try to drive. Don't drink alcohol. And for God's sake, if someone offers you champagne in the next decade, say no. Lena walked Marcus to the door, pressing a folded stack of bills into his hand that he initially tried to refuse before she insisted. When she returned, she found Caleb trying to sit up. Stay down, she ordered. I should go. My daughter is being taken care of. Lena held up her phone. I called your emergency contact, Mrs. Chen. She said Mia's fine, she'll keep her overnight, and you're an idiot for not telling her you were working a night shift. Caleb's jaw tightened. Mrs. Chen was his neighbor, a retired teacher who watched Mia when his schedule got complicated, which happened more often than he liked to admit. I didn't know it was going to turn into this, he said quietly. No one ever does. Lena sank into an armchair across from him, suddenly looking as exhausted as Caleb felt. In the softer lighting of her apartment, away from the performance of the gala, she looked younger, more vulnerable. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. Do you think my father was murdered? Caleb studied her carefully. The question wasn't academic, she'd already made up her mind. She was asking him to confirm what she already knew, so she wouldn't feel crazy for believing it. Yes, he said simply. The timing is too convenient. You inherit, someone immediately tries to kill you. That's not random. That's a plan. Lena's hands clenched in her lap. They said he died in his office, late night, working alone. The security guard found him at his desk, slumped over like he'd fallen asleep. By the time the paramedics arrived, she swallowed hard. They said it was quick, painless. A mercy, really, considering. But you don't believe that. My father was obsessed with his health after my mother died of cancer 10 years ago. He had checkups every 3 months. His last one was 2 weeks before he died. Perfect blood pressure, perfect cholesterol, perfect everything. And then his heart just stops? She shook her head. The company wanted to move past it quickly. Bad for stock prices, they said. Bad for investor confidence. So they cremated him and held a private memorial, and everyone moved on. Except you. Except me. Lena met his gaze. I never wanted this. The company, the responsibility, any of it. I was happy running my gallery, curating exhibits, living my own life. But he left everything to me, controlling interest, board seat, the whole empire. And now someone wants me dead before I can figure out why. Caleb's phone buzzed. He checked it, then frowned. It's Edmund. He wants to meet tomorrow. Says security footage caught something. What time? 9 a.m., his office. Caleb looked up. You don't have to come. This isn't your... Someone tried to poison me tonight, Mr. Ward. Lena's voice was pure steel. That makes it absolutely my problem. Besides... She stood, smoothing her dress. You saved my life. The least I can do is help you figure out who's trying to end it. Caleb woke at 6 the next morning to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of expensive coffee. His mouth felt like he'd gargled sandpaper and his body ached in places he'd forgotten existed. But he was alive. That counted for something. He found Lena in the kitchen, already dressed in tailored slacks and a silk blouse, looking every inch the billionaire heiress the magazines wrote about. She poured coffee into a mug and handed it to him without a word. There's ibuprofen on the counter, she said. And Marcus left instructions. You're supposed to eat something bland. Caleb downed 4 pills and sipped the coffee carefully. It was exactly as good as he'd expected from someone who could afford to pay what Lena probably paid for beans. Thank you. For last night. For letting me stay. You drank poison meant for me. It seemed like the least I could do. She leaned against the counter, studying him with that same assessing intelligence. I've been thinking about what you said. About my father. And? I want to hire you. Caleb nearly choked on his coffee. What? Not as a driver. As... She gestured vaguely. Protection. Investigation. Whatever you call what you used to do. Someone tried to kill me. Someone probably killed my father. And you're the first person in 6 weeks who's actually told me the truth, instead of trying to manage me or placate me or position themselves for advantage. Miss Fairmont, Lena. Lena. I'm not that person anymore. I left the service for a reason. I have a daughter who's already lost her mother. I'll pay you $5,000 a day plus expenses, and when this is over, I'll set up a trust fund for your daughter's education. Full ride to any university she wants. Caleb stared at her. You can't just throw money at this. Watch me. Lena's expression was fierce. I have resources. You have skills. Someone out there thinks I'm an easy target because I'm young and female, and I spent the last 6 years looking at paintings instead of learning how to run a corporation. I need someone who sees threats the way you do, someone who doesn't have a stake in Fairmont Industries or a history with my father's associates. Someone I can actually trust. You don't know me. You're right. I don't. She moved closer, and Caleb saw something raw in her eyes. Fear and determination mixed in equal measure. But you put yourself between me and a killer without hesitation. You drank poison to save my life. Either you're the most dedicated driver in Manhattan, or you're someone who still believes in protecting people even after the world has given you every reason not to. Caleb thought about Mia, about the modest apartment in Queens that was all he could afford on a driver's salary, about the college fund he tried to contribute to every month and the private school he couldn't quite justify, about the nightmares he still had about his wife's car wrapped around a telephone pole and the accident report that had never quite added up. 1 week, he heard himself say. I'll give you 1 week. We figure out who's behind this, we go to the authorities with evidence, and then I walk away. Lena's smile was slight but genuine. 1 week, starting now. Though Edmund Cartwright's office was everything Caleb expected. Top floor, corner suite, walls of windows offering a view of Manhattan that probably cost more per square foot than most people's homes. The man himself sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of mahogany, his expression grave as he gestured them to seats. I've reviewed the security footage personally, Edmund said without preamble. The waiter who served you doesn't exist. Lena leaned forward. What do you mean? I mean, he's not on any staff list. Not mine, not the caterers, not the venues. He appears on camera at 9:47 p.m. entering through the service entrance with a group of legitimate servers. At 10:03 he approaches you with the champagne. At 10:04 Mr. Ward intervenes. And at 10:05, Edmund turned his monitor to face them. He walks out the front door like he's going for a smoke break. Never comes back. The footage showed a man of average height and build, dark hair, forgettable features. He moved with confidence, born of knowing exactly where the cameras were and how to avoid giving them a clear angle. Professional, Caleb murmured. Military or intelligence background. Knows how to blend. I've sent the footage to some contacts, Edmund said. Quietly. If he's in any database, we'll find him. And if he's not, Lena asked, then we're dealing with someone very good or very well connected. Edmund's expression darkened. Lena, I knew your father for 30 years. He was one of the most careful men I've ever met. Paranoid, even. If someone got to him, then they're good enough to get to anyone. Lena's voice was steady, but Caleb saw her hands clench in her lap. I need to see his office. At Fairmont Industries, whatever he was working on before he died. The company sealed it after the funeral, out of respect. Then unseal it. I'm the majority shareholder. I have the right. Edmund studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll make the call. But Lena, be careful. Your father built an empire, but empires make enemies, and someone out there is playing a very dangerous game. As they left, Caleb caught Lena's arm gently. Are you sure about this? Once we start digging, we can't put the dirt back. Lena looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death too quickly. Someone murdered my father and tried to kill me. The dirt's already out, Mr. Ward. Now we're just deciding whether to bury it or throw it in their faces. Caleb thought about his wife, about the accident that wasn't quite an accident, about 3 years of quiet grief and careful invisibility that hadn't kept him safe, just kept him small. Then let's dig, he said. And somewhere in the city, in an office that didn't officially exist, a man in an expensive suit received a phone call and listened in silence before speaking 2 words that would change everything. She knows. The elevator to the 42nd floor of Fairmont Tower moved with the whisper-quiet efficiency that separated luxury from mere expense. Caleb stood beside Lena, watching the numbers climb and trying to ignore the way his ribs still ached from last night's poison. The ibuprofen had taken the edge off, but his reflection in the polished steel doors showed a man who looked like he'd lost a fight, which, technically, he had. Lena had been silent since they left Edmund's office, her jaw set in a way that reminded Caleb of soldiers he'd known who were walking into combat zones. She'd changed into a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his car, her hair pulled back severe enough to hurt, and she wore her father's watch on her left wrist, too large sliding down toward her hand with every movement. A talisman or a weapon, Caleb couldn't tell which. You don't have to do this today, he said quietly. We can wait. For what? For whoever tried to kill me to try again? She didn't look at him. My father spent 40 years building this company. Someone murdered him for it. I'm not waiting. The elevator chimed. The doors opened onto a reception area decorated in the aggressive minimalism that wealthy people called taste, glass and steel and uncomfortable-looking furniture that cost a fortune to look that hostile. A woman in her 50s sat behind a desk that could have doubled as a landing strip, her expression shifting from professional courtesy to genuine surprise when she saw Lena. Ms. Fairmont, we weren't expecting you. I know, Patricia. Lena's voice had gone corporate smooth, every syllable calculated. I need access to my father's office. Patricia's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Of course, although I should mention that Mr. Kessler asked to be notified if you came by. Something about quarterly reports that need your signature. Graham can wait. Lena was already moving past the desk, Caleb following a half-step behind like a shadow, learning to walk upright. I'll find him when I'm ready. The executive corridor stretched ahead like a hallway in a museum dedicated to corporate power. Portraits of former Fairmont Industries leaders lined the walls, Stern men in suits that had gone out of style decades ago, their eyes following visitors with the judgment of the successful dead. At the end of the hall, double doors of dark wood stood closed, a bronze nameplate catching the light. Robert Fairmont, Chief Executive Officer. Lena's hand trembled when she reached for the handle. Just a fraction, barely visible, but Caleb saw it. Saw the way she had to force herself to turn the knob and push the door open into the space where her father had died. The office was exactly what Caleb expected, and somehow worse for it. Massive desk, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city her father had helped build, walls lined with awards and photographs documenting a life of achievement. But there was a stillness to the room that had nothing to do with emptiness and everything to do with absence. The air itself felt wrong, like the space was holding its breath. Lena stood in the doorway, and Caleb watched her face transform as memory collided with present tense. "He used to let me sit in his chair when I was little," she said, her voice gone small. "Pretend I was running meetings with my stuffed animals. He'd play along, ask Mr. Bear about quarterly projections." A sharp exhale that might have been a laugh, or might have been something breaking. "God, I haven't thought about that in years." Caleb gave her space, moving to the windows while she collected herself. From this height, Manhattan looked like a circuit board, all precise angles and carefully planned chaos. He could see the Cartwright Foundation building from here, the rooftop garden where last night's gala had spilled out during cocktail hour. 24 hours ago, he'd been a driver. Now he was standing in a dead man's office, helping his daughter hunt for proof of murder. "Tell me what we're looking for," he said. Lena crossed to the desk, her heels silent on carpet thick enough to muffle secrets. "I don't know. Something that explains why he had to die. Something that scared someone enough to kill him." She started opening drawers, her movements growing more frustrated with each empty space. They cleared everything out. All his files, his personal effects. It's like they erased him. Who's they? The board. The transition team. Graham Kessler, probably. He's been CFO for 15 years, my father's right hand. Bitterness crept into her tone. He kept telling me to focus on the memorial, let the company handle business as usual. Said my father would have wanted continuity. Caleb filed that name away. "Kessler have access to this office?" "Everyone did. My father was—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "Particular about privacy in life. But in death, the company decided transparency was more important. They let the board go through everything, inventory it all for the transition. Which means if there was evidence, it's gone." "Maybe." Lena ran her hand along the desk's edge, and something shifted. A panel Caleb had taken for decorative trim popped free with a soft click. Behind it, a fingerprint scanner glowed pale blue. They both stared at it. "I didn't know that was there," Lena whispered. Caleb moved closer. The scanner was high-end, the kind of biometric security that cost serious money and suggested serious paranoia. "Try it." "It won't work. It's keyed to his fingerprint." "Your father left you everything else. Try it." Lena pressed her thumb to the scanner. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the blue light shifted to green, and a section of the wall behind the desk swung inward with the pneumatic hiss of a hermetic seal breaking. "Jesus," Caleb breathed. The hidden compartment was small, barely larger than a safe deposit box, but what it contained made Lena's breath catch. A leather portfolio, the kind lawyers used for important documents, a burner phone still in its packaging, and a USB drive on a lanyard, the metal warm to the touch like it had been waiting. Lena reached for the portfolio with shaking hands. Inside, documents were arranged with the meticulous care of a man who knew they might be his last words. The first page was a letter, handwritten in blue ink that had bled slightly through the expensive paper. "My dearest Lena," she read aloud, her voice cracking. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone and my worst fears have been realized. Forgive me for not being braver. Forgive me for not protecting you better. But most of all, forgive me for what I'm about to ask you to do." Caleb watched her face as she read, saw the grief and fury warring for dominance. Outside, the city hummed with oblivious life. Inside this office, a dead man was speaking. For the last 8 months, I've known that someone inside Fairmont Industries has been stealing from us. Not small amounts, millions. Systematically moved through shell companies and offshore accounts with the kind of sophistication that requires intimate knowledge of our systems. I hired private investigators. I followed the money. And what I found terrified me enough to write this letter. Lena's hands were shaking now. She set the letter down and reached for the USB drive, but Caleb stopped her. "Not here," he said quietly. "If your father was paranoid enough to hide this, he had reason. We need somewhere secure." "My apartment is the first place they'd look." Caleb thought fast. "Do you have somewhere else? Somewhere connected to you, but not obvious?" Lena's eyes went distant. "My gallery. The office in the back. My father bought the building years ago, but it's not in the Fairmont Industries portfolio. Personal investment." "Then that's where we go." A knock on the office door made them both freeze. Caleb's hand went instinctively to his hip, where his service weapon used to be before he'd traded protection for peace. Lena's eyes met his, and he saw the calculation happening. Answer or hide? "Lena, it's Graham. Patricia said you were here." Lena's jaw tightened. She gathered the documents quickly, shoving them back into the portfolio while Caleb closed the hidden compartment. The wall panel clicked into place just as she called out, "Come in." Graham Kessler entered like a man who owned the space, which, in every way that didn't involve paperwork, he probably did. Late 50s, silver hair worn slightly too long to be corporate conservative, a suit that fit the way only bespoke tailoring could manage. His smile was warm and concerned and didn't quite reach his eyes. "There you are. I've been trying to reach you since last night." His gaze flicked to Caleb, dismissed him as unimportant, returned to Lena. "I heard about the incident at the gala. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Graham." "Patricia mentioned some kind of altercation with staff?" His tone suggested he already knew more than he was saying. "Security's been very tight-lipped about it." "Just a misunderstanding, nothing to worry about." "Still." Graham moved into the office with the ease of long familiarity, his hand trailing along the desk's edge in a gesture that felt territorial. "You should have called me. After everything you've been through, you don't need additional stress. Speaking of which," he pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. "The quarterly board meeting is Thursday. I know you've been grieving, but the board really does need to see you taking an active role. Investor confidence, stock prices, all that." Lena's knuckles went white on the portfolio. "I'll be there." "Excellent. And perhaps we should have lunch beforehand? I can walk you through your father's typical presentation style, help you prepare." His smile widened. "He'd want you to succeed, Lena. We all do." "I'm sure." Lena started toward the door, forcing Graham to step aside. "But right now, I have other matters to attend to. The quarterly reports can wait until Thursday." Graham's expression flickered, just for a second, annoyance bleeding through the concerned mentor mask before he smoothed it away. "Of course. Although I should mention, there are some irregularities in the Asia-Pacific division that need your signature, time-sensitive contracts. If you could just send them to my assistant, I'll review them." "Your father always handled these personally." "My father's dead, Graham." The words came out sharp enough to draw blood. "And I'm not him. Thursday. We'll discuss everything Thursday." She was out the door before he could respond, Caleb following close enough to catch the way Graham's jaw clenched. In the elevator, Lena stabbed the button for the parking garage with enough force to hurt. "You don't trust him," Caleb said. "I don't trust anyone." The elevator descended, and Lena clutched the portfolio like it might dissolve if she loosened her grip. "My father's letter said someone inside the company. Graham's been CFO for 15 years. He has access to everything. He also seems very interested in those Asia-Pacific contracts. Time-sensitive." Lena's laugh was bitter. "Everything's always urgent with Graham. Sign this, approve that, don't worry about the details. My father used to joke that Graham thought faster than he could talk." She paused. "He stopped joking about it 8 months ago." 8 months. The same timeline her father's letter had mentioned. Caleb filed that away with everything else that didn't quite add up. The parking garage was dim and nearly empty, their footsteps echoing off concrete. Caleb had parked in visitor parking, a sedan he'd borrowed from the car service with the promise he'd return it undamaged. That promise was looking increasingly optimistic. He was reaching for the door handle when instinct screamed. Caleb grabbed Lena and yanked her backward just as the sedan exploded. The blast wave hit like a physical wall, hot air and pressure throwing them both to the ground. Caleb twisted mid-fall, taking the impact on his shoulder to protect Lena's head. Chunks of metal rained down, pinging off concrete with sounds like hailstones made of violence. The fireball climbed toward the ceiling, black smoke billowing, and somewhere an alarm started shrieking. Caleb's ears rang, his vision swam, but his body moved on autopilot, years of training overriding the shock. He hauled Lena to her feet, checking her for injuries with quick, efficient movements. "Are you hurt?" She stared at the burning wreckage, her face bone white. They tried to... Can you walk?" "What?" "Lena." He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to focus. "Can you walk?" She nodded, mute with shock. "Then we move. Now. They might still be watching." He kept her close as they ran for the emergency stairs, the portfolio somehow still clutched in her arms. Behind them, the fire spread to another car, a secondary explosion punching through the garage with a bass note that Caleb felt in his chest. They took the stairs 3 at a time, Caleb's ribs screaming protest, until they burst out onto the street into cold air and confusion. People were already gathering, phones out, filming the smoke that poured from the garage entrance. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Caleb pulled Lena into the crowd, just 2 more shocked bystanders, and kept moving until they were 2 blocks away. Only then did he let himself stop, chest heaving, and check her again. "You're sure you're not hurt?" "I'm fine. Lena's voice cracked. "They blew up your car, Caleb. If we'd been 5 seconds slower..." "But we weren't." He scanned the street, looking for threats, finding only ordinary Manhattan chaos. "Do you have your phone?" She nodded, pulling it from her jacket pocket with trembling hands. "Call Edmund. Tell him what happened. Tell him to pull security footage from the garage." Caleb's mind raced through possibilities, discarding and reassessing. A car bomb means sophistication, resources. This isn't some amateur trying to get lucky. This is someone who wants me dead no matter what it costs. Lena's shock was crystallizing into something harder. Someone who knew we'd be there, who knew what car you were driving. The implications of that settled over them like ash. Someone inside Fairmont Tower, someone who'd watched them go into her father's office and made a call, someone who'd had a bomb ready and waiting. Caleb thought about Graham Kessler's too convenient arrival, about his interest in time-sensitive contracts, about the way he'd touched her father's desk like it already belonged to him. "Your gallery," he said. "We need to see what's on that USB drive. Now." They caught a cab, Caleb paying cash and giving an address 3 blocks from their actual destination. In the back seat, Lena made her call to Edmund, her voice steady even as her hands shook. She was good at this, Caleb realized, compartmentalizing fear, functioning through crisis. It was a skill you didn't learn in gallery curation classes. The Fairmont Gallery occupied a converted brownstone in Chelsea, all exposed brick and soaring ceilings, and the kind of carefully curated emptiness that made art look important. A woman in her 30s looked up from the front desk, her professional smile morphing into concern when she saw Lena's face. "Ms. Fairmont, is everything—" "I need the office, Rachel. No interruptions, no calls, no visitors. Understand?" Rachel's eyes widened, but she nodded. "Of course. Should I—" "Just make sure we're not disturbed." The office in the back was small but comfortable, more Lena's style than the corporate ice palace at Fairmont Tower. Books on art history, photographs of exhibits, a desk that looked actually used instead of decorative. Lena locked the door, pulled the blinds, and booted up her laptop with movements that had gone mechanical. Caleb watched her insert the USB drive, saw her hand still shaking, and made a decision. "Stop." She looked up. "What?" "Just stop. For 1 second." He moved closer, gentling his voice the way he did with Mia after nightmares. "You almost died. Twice. In 24 hours. It's okay to not be okay." "I don't have time to not be okay." But her voice cracked on the last word. and suddenly she was crying, harsh, angry tears that she tried to wipe away with shaking hands. Someone killed my father. Someone tried to kill me, and I don't even know why. I can't. Breathe, Caleb said quietly. Just breathe. She did, ragged inhales that slowly steadied. When she looked at him again, her eyes were red but clear. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Is that what they taught you in the Secret Service? That's what 3 years of raising a daughter alone taught me. Caleb offered a small smile. Fear's not weakness. It's information. Use it. Lena nodded, wiping her face one more time. Then she turned back to the laptop, and together they opened the files her father had died protecting. The USB drive contained 3 folders: financial records, communications, and a video file labeled simply For Lena. She clicked the video first. The screen filled with her father's face, Robert Fairmont in his office, recording himself with the stiff formality of someone unused to cameras. The timestamp showed 2 months before his death. Lena, his voice made her flinch. If you're watching this, I'm sorry. Sorry for leaving you alone. Sorry for putting this burden on you. But I'm out of options and I need you to understand what I've found. He leaned forward, and Caleb saw the same intelligence in his eyes that he saw in Lena's, and underneath it, bone-deep fear. 8 months ago, I noticed irregularities in our quarterly reports, small discrepancies easily explained away. But I've been in this business 40 years, and I know the difference between accounting errors and deliberate obfuscation, so I started digging. Robert pulled up documents on screen, spreadsheets that meant nothing to Caleb but made Lena's breath catch. Someone has been systematically embezzling from Fairmont Industries for at least 3 years, possibly longer. It's hard to tell when they've been this careful. They're using shell companies in the Cayman Islands, routing money through legitimate acquisitions, hiding transfers in the noise of normal operations. The total amount... He paused, and Caleb saw his throat work. Over $200 million. Jesus, Lena whispered. I hired investigators. Private, outside the company. They traced the money to a network of accounts, but every trail went cold at the same name, Kessler Holdings. Robert's face hardened. Graham has been stealing from me for years, from us, and when I confronted him... The video jumped, static interrupting. When it returned, Robert looked older, exhausted. He denied everything, called it a misunderstanding, a mistake in the tracking. But I saw his face, Lena. I saw the calculation happening, and the next day I started having... He touched his chest. Episodes. Heart palpitations. Shortness of breath. My doctor couldn't find anything wrong, but I know poisoning when I feel it. Caleb's jaw clenched. Slow poisoning, building to a heart attack. The same method someone had tried on Lena, just stretched over months instead of seconds. I'm hiding this evidence where only you can find it. The financial records prove the embezzlement. The communications show Graham's network. He's not working alone. And if I'm dead, it means he decided I was too dangerous to let live. Robert's eyes glistened. Don't trust the board. Don't trust company security. Don't trust anyone who benefits from my death. And Lena, his voice broke. Please be careful. Please survive this. You're all I have left of your mother, and I can't... The video ended abruptly, frozen on Robert Fairmont's grief-stricken face. Lena sat motionless, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Caleb gave her space, opening the financial records folder while she collected herself. Even with his limited understanding of corporate finance, the pattern was clear. Money moving in careful increments, hidden in legitimate transactions, building to a fortune over years. He knew, Lena said finally, her voice hollow. He knew, and he tried to handle it himself, and they killed him for it. The communications folder, Caleb said gently. We need to see who else is involved. The emails were damning. Graham Kessler's name appeared again and again, but so did others. Board members, division heads, even Patricia, the receptionist they'd seen earlier. A network of complicity, everyone taking their cut, everyone with motive to protect the secret. And then Caleb saw a name that made his blood run cold. Edmund Cartwright. No, Lena breathed, reading over his shoulder. No, Edmund wouldn't. But the emails were clear. Edmund facilitating real estate deals that laundered money. Edmund providing cover at board meetings. Edmund's signature on documents that shouldn't have existed. The gala, Caleb said slowly. He hosted it. He controlled security. He's the one who requested me specifically as your driver. Because you're former Secret Service. Because if something happened to me, you'd be the obvious suspect. Lena's face had gone pale. He set you up, set us both up. Caleb's phone buzzed. A text from Edmund. Saw the news about the car bomb. Thank God you're both safe. Where are you? I need to debrief you about what security found. Don't answer, Lena said. I'm not. Caleb turned off his phone, pulled the battery. We need to assume they're tracking you. Phone, credit cards, anything electronic. Then how do we... She stopped, understanding dawning. We can't go to the police. If Edmund's involved, he has connections. They'll bury this. Or bury us. Caleb thought fast. We need leverage. Something we can use to force them into the open. Lena looked at the laptop screen, at the evidence that had cost her father his life. The board meeting, Thursday. Graham said it was crucial that I attend, because they want you where they can control you, where they can watch you, or where they can finish what they started. Her expression shifted, hardening into something fierce and reckless. What if I gave them what they wanted? Lena, listen. They think I'm just a naive heiress playing at business. They think I don't know anything, so I show up Thursday, act normal, let them believe they've gotten away with it. That's insane. They've tried to kill you twice, and failed both times because you were there. She met his eyes. I need bait. They need a trap. We have 3 days to build one that actually works. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to tell her this was suicide, that they should run, disappear, let someone else handle it. But he looked at her face and saw the same determination he'd seen in soldiers who'd lost too much to ever back down. Saw the ghost of her father in the set of her jaw. We'll need help, he said finally, the kind that doesn't ask questions. You have someone? Maybe. Caleb thought about Marcus, about other contacts from his old life, people who owed him favors or who'd understand that sometimes the law wasn't enough. But Lena, if we do this, if we walk into that boardroom, there's no guarantee we walk back out. My father didn't walk out of his office. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. But he left me the truth. The least I can do is make sure it doesn't die with me. Outside, the city continued its oblivious dance. Inside the gallery, 2 people who'd been strangers 48 hours ago made plans to expose a conspiracy that had already killed once and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. And in a penthouse office overlooking Central Park, Graham Kessler answered his phone and listened to Edmund Cartwright's fury with practiced calm. She has the files, Edmund said. Robert's files. We need to move up the timeline. Graham watched the sun set over Manhattan, painting the city in shades of blood and gold. Already done. Thursday's board meeting will be her last. Make sure Ward's there too. I want them both in the same room when it happens. And if she doesn't show, she will. Graham's smile was cold. Lena's her father's daughter. She won't run. She'll fight. He hung up, poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, and toasted the skyline. To family, he murmured, and to tying up loose ends. The safe house Marcus arranged was exactly the kind of place that didn't exist on any map. A 4th-floor walk-up in Astoria above a bodega that had been selling more than groceries since the 80s. Caleb had spent enough time in places like this during his Secret Service years to recognize the signs. Reinforced door frames, windows that didn't quite match the building's vintage, and a super who took cash and asked no questions. Marcus met them at the door with the wary expression of a man who'd seen too many operations go sideways. He looked between Caleb and Lena, taking in the soot on their clothes and the portfolio clutched like a life preserver, and shook his head. You look worse than yesterday, he said to Caleb. I'm starting to think you have a death wish. Just really bad luck. Caleb ushered Lena inside, checking the hallway one more time before closing the door. The apartment was sparse. Secondhand furniture, curtains that blocked any view from outside, a kitchenette that looked like it hadn't been used for actual cooking in years. But it was secure, which was all that mattered. Marcus gestured to the couch. Sit, talk, and this better be good because I've got 3 other clients who actually pay on time. Over the next hour, they laid it out. Robert Fairmont's murder, the poisoned champagne, the car bomb, the evidence that implicated half of Fairmont Industries' leadership in systematic embezzlement and conspiracy. Marcus listened without interrupting, his face growing progressively grimmer. You're talking about taking down a billionaire and his network of equally wealthy accomplices, he said when they finished. People with connections to law enforcement, politicians, the DA's office. You walk this to the police, it disappears. You go public, you get discredited or dead before the story gains traction. I know, Lena said quietly. That's why we need to make them confess. With what? Harsh language and good intentions? Caleb leaned forward. The board meeting Thursday. Graham wants Lena there, probably to finish what he started. But what if we turn that into an opportunity? Get him talking, get it on record, build a case too public to bury. Marcus's eyebrows rose. You want to wire her up and send her into a room full of people who've already tried to kill her twice. That's your plan. You have a better one? Yeah, run. Change your names. Spend the rest of your lives looking over your shoulders instead of getting killed this week. Marcus stood, pacing to the window. But you're not going to do that, are you? Lena's voice was steady. They murdered my father. They're stealing from a company that employs 12,000 people. If I run, they win. They get away with it, and my father's death means nothing. Your father's death already means nothing if you're too dead to do anything about it. But Marcus was softening. Caleb could hear it in his tone. Fine. Let's say I help you. What exactly are you asking for? Recording equipment, Caleb said. Professional grade, something that'll hold up in court. And backup. People we can trust to be in position if things go wrong. Things always go wrong. Then people we trust to get us out when they do. Marcus studied them both for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts, and made a call. Yeah, it's Chen. I need a favor. The expensive kind. A pause. No, not that expensive. Just moderately life-threatening. Another pause, then a dry laugh. Thursday. I'll send you the details. He hung up and turned back to them. I've got 2 guys who can be there. Former Delta, good in a crisis. Don't ask stupid questions. But Caleb, you understand what you're asking her to do? She walks into that boardroom, she's alone. We can't go in with her. Best we can do is monitor from outside and pray she gets Graham talking before he gets suspicious. I can do it, Lena said. Can you? Marcus's tone was blunt. Because the second you walk in that room, you're performing. One wrong word, one moment of hesitation, and they'll know you're onto them. These aren't stupid people. They've been running this scheme for years. I've been performing my whole life. Lena's smile was bitter. Charity galas, board dinners, pretending I cared about quarterly earnings when all I wanted to do was curate art. I know how to wear a mask, Mr. Chen. I just never had to wear it to save my life before. Caleb caught the edge in her voice. Not fear exactly, but the particular tension of someone standing at a cliff's edge deciding whether to jump or be pushed. He'd seen it before, in agents going undercover, in witnesses testifying against people who'd already proven they could reach through prison walls. We'll prep you, he said. He'd go through scenarios, practice the kind of questions that'll get Graham talking without making him defensive. But Marcus is right. Once you're in that room, you're alone. We can't help you. Then I better not need help. The confidence in her voice would have been reassuring if Caleb didn't know how quickly confidence could curdle into panic when the stakes became real. But he also knew they didn't have better options. Sometimes the only way through was straight ahead, even when straight ahead looked like walking into fire. Marcus made more calls while Caleb and Lena went through Robert Fairmont's files again, this time building a timeline. The embezzlement had started small 3 years ago, payments that could be explained away as consulting fees or legitimate expenses. But it had grown bolder over time, tens of millions moving through increasingly complex webs of shell companies. Graham's signature appeared on most of the authorization documents, but Edmund's name surfaced often enough to confirm his complicity. He's been financing his real estate empire with our money, Lena said, her finger tracing connections on the laptop screen. Every major property acquisition in the last 2 years, every development project, It's all funded with money stolen from Fairmont Industries. And your father figured it out. He confronted Graham. That's when the poisoning started. She pulled up another file, medical records Robert had documented himself. Symptoms began the day after their meeting. Irregular heartbeat, chest pain, fatigue. His doctor ran every test. Nothing conclusive, but the symptoms got worse every time he went to the office. Caleb thought about the dedication it took to keep documenting your own murder. To know you were dying and still gather evidence with the methodical precision of someone who believed truth mattered more than survival. Your father was brave, he said quietly. My father was stubborn. But Lena's voice cracked. If he'd just gone to the police, they would have killed him faster, and we wouldn't have this evidence. Caleb closed the laptop gently. He protected you the only way he could. He made sure you'd have everything you needed to finish what he started. I don't know if I can. You already have. You're still alive. You're still fighting. That's more than they expected. Marcus returned with a duffel bag that clinked promisingly. He dumped the contents on the coffee table, recording equipment, wireless transmitters, batteries, and what looked like a very expensive camera disguised as a pen. This is what we've got, he said, organizing the equipment with practiced efficiency. Body wire here, goes under your shirt, picks up everything within 15 feet. Backup recorder in your jacket pocket in case the wire fails. And this, he held up the pen, streams video directly to us. Put it in your jacket pocket, lens facing out. We'll see everything you see. Lena picked up the wire, a thin strip of metal and circuitry that looked too delicate to matter. How do I turn it on? You don't. It's always on once we activate it, which means every word you say from the moment you walk into that building gets recorded. No do-overs, no editing. Whatever happens in that room, we capture it all. The weight of that settled over them. One chance, one performance. Everything riding on Lena's ability to make a murderer confess. Caleb's phone, the burner Marcus had provided, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Still at the gallery? Need to see you both. Have information. It was signed simply T. Who's T? Marcus asked. No idea. Caleb showed him the message. Could be a trap. Could be someone who actually wants to help. Lena looked at the number. The gallery's closed now. If they know we're here, they've been watching. Or they have access to security feeds. Caleb thought through the possibilities. We should at least hear them out. In public, somewhere we can control. They chose a diner in Midtown, the kind of place that served breakfast 24 hours and asked no questions about customers who paid in cash. Marcus came along, sitting 3 booths away with clear sightlines to the door. Caleb positioned himself and Lena where they could see anyone approaching, his back to the wall in the automatic defensive posture that never quite left. The woman who walked in 20 minutes later was in her 30s, dressed in business casual that tried too hard to look unremarkable. She scanned the diner, found them, and slid into the booth across from Lena with the nervous energy of someone who'd spent the walkover talking herself into this. Thank you for meeting me, she said. I wasn't sure you would. We're not sure we should have. Caleb kept his voice neutral. Who are you? Teresa Vaughn. I work in Fairmont Industries accounting department. Worked, I guess. I quit this morning. She pulled out a tablet, fingers shaking slightly as she unlocked it. I need to show you something. Something I should have shown someone a long time ago. Lena leaned forward. Go on. Teresa brought up a spreadsheet, numbers and codes that meant nothing to Caleb but made Lena's breath catch. These are internal audit reports from the last 3 years, the ones we give the board every quarter. And these, she swiped to another document. These are the real numbers, the ones we actually generate before they get revised. Someone's cooking the books, Caleb said. Graham Kessler personally oversees the revisions. He calls it accounting optimization, making sure the numbers tell the right story to investors. But what he's actually doing is hiding theft. Massive, systematic theft. Teresa's voice dropped. Your father figured it out, Ms. Fairmont. He came to our department 6 months ago, started asking questions. We were told not to cooperate with him, told it was a management issue above our pay grade. Lena's hands clenched. Who told you that? Patricia. She's not just a receptionist, she's Graham's eyes and ears. Anyone who talks to the wrong people, anyone who asks too many questions, she reports them. 3 people in our department were fired in the last year for supposed performance issues, but the real reason was they were getting too close to the truth. And you? Caleb asked. Why are you coming forward now? Teresa met his gaze. Because I saw the news about the car bomb. Because I know what they did to Mr. Fairmont. And because I have a daughter too. And I want to be able to look her in the eye and tell her I did the right thing, even when it was dangerous. The sincerity in her voice was hard to fake. Caleb glanced at Marcus, who gave a subtle nod. His read was the same. Teresa was terrified but genuine.
Jeez.
Can you testify to this? Lena asked. In court? Under oath? If you can protect me, yes. If you can guarantee they won't come after my family. Teresa's voice broke. I'm a single mother, Miss Fairmont. My daughter's 8. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. Lena's voice had gone fierce. I promise you, we're going to end this. And when we do, you'll have a job waiting. A real one, with a company that doesn't ask you to lie. Teresa's eyes glistened. Your father was a good man. Everyone in accounting knew it. He actually cared about the people who worked for him, not just the stock price. When he died, she wiped her eyes roughly. We knew it wasn't a heart attack, but no one wanted to say it out loud because saying it meant admitting we were all complicit. She pushed the tablet across the table. This is everything I could pull without triggering alerts. Transaction records, revised audits, internal memos. It's not complete, but it should be enough to show a pattern. Caleb took the tablet carefully, like it might explode. Which, in a sense, it could. This was the kind of evidence that started criminal investigations and ended careers. Combined with Robert's files, they now had documentation from both inside and outside the conspiracy. Thursday's board meeting, Teresa said. They're planning something. Graham's been in closed-door meetings all week with Edmund Cartwright and 3 other board members. Whatever they're discussing, it's making people nervous. The legal department's been preparing documents, NDAs, settlement offers. Settlement offers. Lena's voice sharpened. For what? I don't know exactly. But the rumor is they're planning to force you out, declare you incompetent to run the company, buy out your shares at a reduced price, put Graham in charge permanently. Teresa's expression was grim. If you show up Thursday, you're walking into an ambush. They're going to have lawyers, board members, maybe even reporters. Make it a public spectacle so you can't fight back without looking unstable. Caleb saw the trap clearly now. Get Lena in that boardroom, surround her with hostile witnesses, paint her as an emotional wreck who couldn't handle the pressure. And if she resisted, if she accused them of murder and theft, she'd look paranoid, delusional, easy to dismiss, unless she had proof, unless she got them to confess on record. Thank you, Lena said quietly, for this, for taking the risk. Teresa stood, gathering her things with the jerky movements of someone running on adrenaline and fear. Your father used to say that a company was only as good as its word, that integrity mattered more than profit. She met Lena's eyes. Make him right, Ms. Fairmont. Make it all mean something. She left quickly, disappearing into the Manhattan night. Caleb watched through the window until she was out of sight, then turned to Marcus. We need to get her somewhere safe. If they figure out she talked, already on it. Marcus was texting on his phone. I've got a place she can stay. Off the grid secure, she'll be fine. But Caleb heard the unspoken caveat. She'd be fine if they succeeded. If they failed, nowhere would be safe enough. They returned to the safe house as midnight crept toward morning. Lena sat at the kitchen table, going through Teresa's files while Caleb made coffee that tasted like battery acid and regret. Marcus had gone to coordinate with his contacts, leaving them alone with evidence that was either their salvation or their death warrant. They're going to use my grief against me, Lena said, not looking up from the tablet. Paint me as unstable. A daughter who can't let go, who's making wild accusations because she can't accept her father's death. Then don't give them ammunition, Caleb set a mug in front of her. You walk in there cold, professional. Every emotion locked down. Make them the ones who lose control. And if they don't? If Graham's too smart to confess? Then we use what we have and hope it's enough. He sat across from her, the table between them suddenly feeling like the only solid thing in a dissolving world. But I think he'll talk. Men like Graham, they can't help themselves. They need to win, Need to prove they're smarter. Give him an opening, let him think you're beaten, and he'll tell you exactly how he did it. Lena finally looked up, and Caleb saw the exhaustion written in every line of her face. How do you do this? Stay calm when everything's falling apart? Practice. And a 7-year-old who needs me to hold it together. He thought about Mia, wondered if she was asleep or if she'd sensed something wrong the way children always did. After my wife died, I had a choice. Fall apart or keep moving. I chose moving because stopping meant Mia lost both parents. What happened to her? Your wife. Caleb hadn't talked about Sarah in 3 years, hadn't let himself examine the wound that never quite healed, but something about sitting in a safe house at 3 a.m, planning to confront murderers, loosened the words. Car accident. She was driving home from visiting her sister upstate. The police said she lost control on a curve, went through a guardrail, hit a tree at 60 miles an hour, dead instantly. He traced the rim of his coffee mug. The accident report was clean, too clean. No skid marks, no sign she tried to brake. The investigating officer wrote it off as distracted driving. Maybe she was on her phone, case closed. But you didn't believe it. Sarah was the most careful driver I knew. Paranoid about safety, especially after Mia was born, and her phone records showed no activity in the hour before the crash. Caleb's jaw tightened. I pushed for a deeper investigation. Asked the Secret Service to look into it since she was married to an agent. They told me I was grief-stricken, seeing patterns that weren't there. Eventually, I realized I had a choice, keep fighting and lose my job, or accept it and focus on raising our daughter. You chose Mia. I chose survival, same as you're doing now. He met her eyes. But I never stopped thinking about it. Never stopped wondering if someone cut her brakes or tampered with the steering, whether the accident that took her from us was really an accident at all. Lena was quiet for a moment, then, is that why you saved me? Because you couldn't save her? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of watching bad people get away with it. Caleb stood, needing to move. 3 years ago, I thought leaving the service would keep me safe, keep Mia safe. Instead, I just went invisible. And invisible doesn't mean protected. It just means no one notices when you disappear. You're not invisible anymore. No. He looked at her, this woman who'd been a stranger 4 days ago and was now the closest thing to a partner he'd had since Sarah died. Neither are you, which means Thursday, when you walk into that boardroom, every eye will be on you. Every word you say will be analyzed. There's no room for error. Then I better not make any errors. Her confidence would have been reassuring if Caleb didn't know how fast confidence could shatter under pressure. But he also knew they were past the point of backing down. The conspiracy knew they had Robert's evidence, knew they were a threat. Running would just mean dying tired instead of dying fighting. Marcus returned at dawn with recording equipment and a detailed plan that had too many variables and not enough guarantees. They spent the day rehearsing, Caleb playing Graham, throwing accusations and manipulation at Lena until she learned to deflect and redirect, teaching her to ask questions that sounded innocent but were designed to extract admissions. You can't ask him directly if he killed your father, Caleb explained. That puts him on defense. Instead, you sympathize. Tell him you know managing the company's finances must be complex. Ask him how your father missed the irregularities for so long. Make it about Graham's cleverness, not his guilt. Lena practiced the lines until they sounded natural, until she could deliver them with the right mix of naivety and curiosity. Marcus rigged the recording equipment, testing and retesting until he was satisfied it would work under the stress of an actual confrontation. Remember, Marcus said, fitting the wire under Lena's blouse. This transmits everything to us in real time. We'll be in a van 2 blocks away, monitoring. If things go wrong, if you feel threatened, you say the word protocol, and we come in. But understand, the second we breach that boardroom, the recording becomes questionable. Defense lawyers will argue coercion, contamination of evidence. So you need to get the confession before it comes to that. No pressure, Lena murmured, all the pressure. Marcus's expression was grim. These people have killed before. They'll kill again if they think it's necessary. Don't give them a reason to think it's necessary. Wednesday night, Caleb barely slept. He lay on the safe house couch, listening to the city breathe and thinking about all the ways Thursday could go wrong. At some point, Lena emerged from the bedroom, wrapped in a blanket. and sat in the armchair across from him. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Too many variables." "Tell me we're doing the right thing." Caleb considered lying, offering false comfort, but she deserved better. "I don't know if it's right. I just know it's necessary. Your father left you evidence for a reason. If we don't use it, he died for nothing. And if we do use it, and it gets us killed, then at least we tried. At least someone knows the truth." He sat up, the blanket falling away. "My whole career I protected people who mattered. Presidents, foreign dignitaries, people who shaped policy and history, and when Sarah died, I couldn't protect the one person who mattered most. So maybe this is me trying to prove I can still do what I was trained for. That I'm not just a driver running from my past." Lena pulled the blanket tighter. "I keep thinking about what my father said in that video, that he was sorry for not being braver. And I wonder if that's what I'll be thinking when it's my turn to record a message I hope someone finds. It won't come to that. You don't know that." "No," Caleb admitted, "but I know you're braver than you think. You've survived 2 murder attempts. You've uncovered a conspiracy. You're about to walk into a room full of people who want you dead and make them confess. That's not the behavior of someone who lacks courage. It might just be the behavior of someone too stubborn to know when to quit. Then you're your father's daughter in every way that matters." They sat in comfortable silence as dawn crept through the windows, painting the safe house in shades of gold and gray. Outside, the city woke up to another Thursday, ordinary and oblivious. Inside, 2 people who'd been strangers less than a week ago prepared for a confrontation that would either expose a conspiracy or end their lives. Marcus arrived at 8 with coffee and instructions. "The van's ready, equipment's tested. My guys are in position at the building, one in the lobby pretending to be courier, one on the roof with visual on the boardroom windows. If you need extraction, they can be there in under a minute." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Lena said. She dressed carefully, a charcoal suit that projected authority, her hair pulled back in a way that looked professional but not severe. She wore her father's watch again, the weight of it grounding her. When Marcus fitted the wire and the backup recorder, she stood perfectly still, breathing deep and even. Caleb checked his own equipment, earpiece to monitor the transmission, a concealed camera, and a weapon he hoped he wouldn't need. Marcus had pulled strings to get it, and Caleb had promised himself he'd only use it if there was no other choice. "You remember the signals?" Marcus asked Lena. "Touch my watch if I need you to document something specific. Adjust my jacket collar if I'm in immediate danger. Say protocol if I need extraction. And don't be a hero. If it goes sideways, you get out. The evidence we have is enough to start an investigation, even without a confession." But they all knew that wasn't true. Without Graham's admission on tape, everything they had was circumstantial, suggestive but not conclusive. A good lawyer could create enough reasonable doubt to bury the case in litigation for years. They drove separately to Fairmont Tower. Lena in a car service Marcus arranged, Caleb and Marcus in the surveillance van. The morning traffic was thick, giving Caleb too much time to think about everything that could go wrong. When Lena's building came into view, his stomach clenched. "She's entering now," Marcus said, watching the feed from Lena's camera pen. The image was clear: lobby security, elevator bank, people moving through their morning routines unaware that a reckoning was coming. Caleb put in his earpiece and Lena's breathing filled his head. Steady, controlled. The breathing of someone who'd decided fear was a luxury they couldn't afford. The elevator rose. The numbers climbed. And when the doors opened on the 42nd floor, Patricia looked up from her desk with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Miss Fairmont, they're waiting for you in the boardroom." "Thank you, Patricia." Lena's hand appeared in frame, reaching for the boardroom door. Caleb held his breath. Marcus leaned forward, fingers poised over the keyboard to document everything. The door opened, and inside Graham Kessler sat at the head of the table with Edmund Cartwright at his right hand and 5 other board members arranged like a firing squad. "Lena," Graham said, his smile warm and predatory. "So glad you could join us. Please, sit down. We have so much to discuss." Lena took the seat Graham indicated with movements she'd practiced until they looked natural. The boardroom was exactly as she remembered from the handful of meetings she'd attended with her father. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, a table that could seat 20 but today held only 8, and air conditioning set cold enough to keep everyone alert and slightly uncomfortable. Power moves disguised as comfort settings. In the surveillance van 2 blocks away, Caleb watched through Lena's camera feed as she settled into her chair. Her hands were steady as she placed her portfolio on the table, the same leather case that held her father's evidence now serving as a prop. Marcus adjusted the audio levels, filtering out ambient noise until Lena's breathing came through crystal clear. "Thank you all for making time," Lena said, her voice carrying just the right note of uncertain gratitude. "I know how busy everyone is." Graham's smile was indulgent, the expression of a mentor dealing with an eager but naive student. "Nonsense. You're family, Lena. Robert's daughter. Everything we do for the good of the company he built." He gestured to the other board members. "You know everyone here, I believe. Edmund, of course. Janet Reeves from Operations. Thomas Chen, Legal Counsel. Marcus Davidson, Head of Asia Pacific. Patricia. Well, you've met Patricia. And David Stern, who manages our investment portfolio." Each name hit Caleb like a hammer. Every person in that room was implicated in Robert's files. Every person had taken money from the scheme or helped cover it up. Lena was sitting at a table with 7 people who'd collectively decided her father was a problem that needed solving. "I appreciate everyone's support during this difficult transition," Lena said. She'd practiced that line a dozen times, getting the emotional tremor just right, present but controlled, grief that looked like it was being managed instead of weaponized. "I know I have a lot to learn about running Fairmont Industries. My father made it look easy, but—" She paused, letting vulnerability show. "I'm realizing how complex it all is." "That's why we're here," Edmund said, his voice carrying false warmth. "To help guide you through. Your father trusted us with the company's future. We want to honor that trust by making sure you succeed. Even though I have no business background." Lena let doubt creep into her tone. "Even though I've spent the last 6 years in the art world instead of learning about quarterly earnings and market share." Graham leaned forward, his expression sympathetic in a way that made Caleb's jaw clench. "Your father believed you were ready, or he wouldn't have left you controlling interest. But Lena, we need to be honest with each other. The company is facing some significant challenges right now, challenges that require decisive leadership and deep industry knowledge." "What kind of challenges?" "Financial irregularities." Thomas Chen, the lawyer, spoke up. His tone was carefully neutral, but Caleb saw the calculation in his eyes. "Nothing serious, but enough that our auditors have flagged certain transactions for review. Given the scrutiny that follows any change in leadership, we need to address these concerns quickly and transparently." Lena touched her watch, the signal for Marcus to pay close attention and document. "Irregularities? I don't understand. My father ran this company for 40 years. How could there be problems with the finances?" "Not problems exactly," Graham interjected smoothly. "Just questions. You understand how complex corporate accounting is. Money moves between divisions, investments shift, currencies fluctuate. Sometimes things look irregular on paper when they're actually perfectly legitimate, but perception matters, especially to investors." "So what are you suggesting?" Graham exchanged glances with Edmund, a conversation happening in that brief eye contact that Caleb wished he could intercept. "We think it would be prudent to bring in an independent auditor, someone from outside the company to review our books and verify everything's in order. It protects you, protects the company, and reassures our shareholders that we're being responsible stewards." "That sounds reasonable," Lena said carefully. "When would this audit begin?" "Immediately. In fact, we've already retained a firm. They can start next week, provided we have board approval." Graham slid a document across the table. "This authorizes the audit and grants the firm access to all company financial records. All we need is your signature as majority shareholder." Lena picked up the document, and through her camera feed, Caleb could see the dense legal language designed to obscure rather than clarify. Marcus was already typing, pulling up the text to analyze it, but Caleb didn't need a lawyer to understand the trap being set. Sign that document, and Lena would be authorizing an audit conducted by a firm Graham had chosen, one that would almost certainly find exactly what Graham wanted them to find. "I'd like my own lawyer to review this first," Lena said. "Of course." Thomas Chen's smile was thin. "Although I should mention, the timeline is somewhat pressing. Our investors are already nervous about the leadership transition. The longer we wait to address these irregularities, the more opportunity for speculation and stock volatility. How much volatility are we talking about? Hard to say. Marcus Davidson spoke for the first time, his accent carrying the careful precision of someone who'd learned English as a second language. But in my experience, uncertainty drives sell-offs. We could see a 10, maybe 15% drop in share price if rumors of financial irregularities spread before we've had a chance to address them properly. 15% of Fairmont Industries' market value was roughly $3 billion. Lena's controlling interest meant she'd personally lose hundreds of millions, on paper at least, if the stock crashed. It was a number designed to scare, to push her into signing without thinking. Then perhaps we should address the irregularities instead of just auditing them, Lena said, her voice steady despite what Caleb knew had to be racing thoughts. Help me understand what we're actually dealing with. What transactions are being questioned? Graham's expression flickered, just for a second, annoyance bleeding through the mentor mask before he controlled it. Lena, you don't need to worry about technical details. That's what we're here for. Your role as majority shareholders to provide strategic oversight, not get bogged down in accounting minutiae. But they're my company's finances, my father's legacy. She met Graham's eyes with surprising steel. If there are problems, I want to understand them. Specifically. In the van, Marcus whistled low. She's pushing. Good. Make him defensive. Edmund cleared his throat, redirecting attention. Perhaps we should discuss the broader strategic concerns. The irregularities are just one issue. We're also seeing increased competition in our core markets, regulatory pressure in Asia-Pacific, and labor disputes at our manufacturing facilities. Running Fairmont Industries requires full-time dedication and expertise you're still developing. You're saying I'm not qualified. We're saying you're learning. Graham's tone had gone harder, less patient. And we're willing to support that learning. But in the meantime, the company needs experienced leadership, which is why we'd like to propose a restructuring of management responsibilities. Here it was, the real trap. Caleb leaned closer to the screen, every muscle tense. Lena folded her hands on the table. What kind of restructuring? You would retain your position as majority shareholder and chair of the board, Graham said. All the prestige, all the financial benefits. But day-to-day operations would be managed by a CEO with industry experience. Someone the board trusts. Someone who can navigate these complex challenges while you continue your transition into the role. Someone like you. I've been CFO for 15 years. I know this company inside and out. I know where the risks are, where the opportunities are. Your father trusted me to manage our finances through 3 recessions and 2 major market corrections. Graham's voice carried conviction that would have been compelling if Caleb didn't know it was built on lies. This isn't about ego or power. It's about protecting what Robert built, what you've inherited. Lena was quiet for a long moment, and Caleb could hear her breathing change through the earpiece, deeper, more controlled, the way someone breathes when they're about to jump off a cliff. When she spoke, her voice was smaller, younger, exactly the kind of vulnerable uncertainty Graham would want to hear. My father really trusted you? Like a brother. We built this company together, Lena. When he died, Graham's throat worked, and Caleb wondered if the emotion was real or performance. It devastated me, losing my closest friend, my partner. But I promised myself I'd honor his memory by protecting everything he worked for, including you. Then help me understand something. Lena reached for her portfolio, and Caleb's pulse kicked up. This was it. The moment everything either fell into place or fell apart. I've been going through my father's personal files, trying to understand the business, like you said, and I found some things that confused me. Graham went very still. What kind of things? Financial records, transactions that don't quite make sense to someone with my limited understanding. She pulled out papers. Not the originals, Marcus had insisted on copies in case they needed to be destroyed quickly, and spread them on the table. Payments to companies I've never heard of, transfers that seem unusually large for consulting fees, and they all seem to route through accounts in the Cayman Islands. The temperature in the boardroom dropped 10 degrees. Caleb watched the board members' faces through Lena's camera, saw the micro-expressions that couldn't quite be controlled. Edmund's jaw tightened. Janet Reeves looked at Graham. Thomas Chen's hand moved toward his briefcase. Where did you get those? Graham's voice had gone flat. My father's office. He'd hidden them. Lena looked up with perfectly manufactured confusion. I thought maybe you could explain them to me. Since you managed our finances and would understand the accounting, are these legitimate business expenses? Graham stood abruptly, his chair scraping. Those are private documents, confidential company records that should have been turned over to legal during the transition. But they're not company records. Lena's voice stayed innocent even as she twisted the knife. They're my father's personal files, documentation he kept separately, which made me wonder, why would he need to document our own company's transactions unless he wasn't sure they were legitimate? Your father was paranoid in his final months, Edmund cut in, his tone sharp with warning. The stress of running the company, his age, his health issues, he started seeing problems where none existed. Those files are the product of a man who wasn't thinking clearly. My father was perfectly clear. The innocence dropped from Lena's voice like a mask hitting the floor. He was clear enough to realize someone was stealing from him. Someone he trusted. Someone who'd been systematically embezzling for years and poisoning him slowly when he got too close to the truth. The silence that followed was absolute. In the van, Caleb's hand moved to his weapon. Marcus was already on the phone with his extraction team, low, urgent words about being ready to move. Graham's face had gone very calm, which was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. Those are serious accusations, Lena. Career-ending, life-destroying accusations. I hope you have proof to back them up. I have my father's files. I have audit trails. I have documentation of every transfer, every shell company, every dollar you've stolen over the last 3 years. Lena's hands were shaking now, but her voice stayed steady. What I don't have is an explanation, so I'm giving you a chance to provide one. Tell me why you did it. Tell me why my father had to die. Your father died of a heart attack. My father died of slow poisoning designed to look like cardiac failure. Just like the champagne you had served to me at the Cartwright Gala was designed to look like I'd had a heart attack or stroke. Quick, tragic, and convenient for everyone who benefits from my death. Graham laughed, actually laughed, the sound carrying genuine amusement. You sound paranoid, Lena. Unhinged. Exactly the kind of emotional instability we were worried about when discussing your fitness to run this company. Is that what you'll tell people? That I'm crazy? That grief made me delusional? Lena stood now too, facing him across the table. Because I have evidence. I have my father's investigation. I have testimony from people in your own accounting department. And I have recordings of this conversation that are being transmitted in real time to people who will make sure the truth comes out even if you kill me right now. The board members reacted like she detonated a bomb. Janet Reeves gasped. Marcus Davidson swore in Mandarin. Thomas Chen was already reaching for his phone, and Edmund looked like he'd been punched. But Graham just smiled wider, and that's when Caleb knew they'd miscalculated. Recordings, Graham said softly. You're wearing a wire. How wonderfully dramatic. He walked around the table toward Lena with the casual confidence of someone who'd already won. Here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to give me that wire and any copies of your father's files. You're going to sign the documents we've prepared transferring operational control to me. And then you're going to make a public statement about needing time to grieve, stepping back from day-to-day responsibilities. Or what? You'll kill me like you killed my father? I won't need to. Graham was close enough now that Lena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Because if you don't cooperate, I'll make sure everyone knows about your breakdown, the paranoid accusations, the conspiracy theories. I have psychiatrists ready to testify about your unstable mental state, lawyers ready to challenge your competency. And by the time we're done, you won't just lose the company, you'll lose your freedom. Psychiatric commitment for your own protection, of course. Lena's halt moved toward her collar, the signal for immediate danger, but Graham caught her wrist with surprising speed. Don't, he said quietly. Your bodyguards can't help you now. This entire floor is locked down. No one's coming in without my authorization. In the van, Caleb was already moving. Marcus, we need to go. Now. The building's in lockdown. Security won't let us past the lobby. Then we go through them. Caleb checked his weapon, his mind already running through approach vectors and timing. "Have your guys ready to breach from the roof if we can't make it through the main entrance." He was out of the van before Marcus could argue, crossing the street at a run that turned heads. The Fairmont Tower lobby was elegant corporate minimalism, and the security desk was manned by 3 guards who looked competent but not expecting trouble. Caleb's Secret Service credentials were 3 years expired, but he pulled them anyway, banking on the guards not checking too carefully. "Federal agent," he said, flashing the ID too quickly to read. "I need access to the executive floor, now." The lead guard frowned. "Sir, I'm going to need to verify." Caleb drew his weapon. "Verify later. Right now, you have an active threat on the 42nd floor and a civilian in danger. You can help me, or you can explain to the FBI why you prevented an agent from doing his job." The bluff worked, barely. The guard hit a button releasing the elevator, and Caleb was inside before anyone could reconsider. He knew he had maybe 90 seconds before building security called the police, before the whole situation spiraled into a jurisdictional nightmare. 90 seconds to get to Lena before Graham decided she was more valuable dead than difficult. Back in the boardroom, Lena had gone very still in Graham's grip. Through the earpiece, Caleb could hear her rapid breathing, hear the edge of panic she was fighting to control. "You won't get away with this," she said, voice tight. "People know I'm here. People are listening. People who can't prove anything without your cooperation." Graham released her wrist and gestured to Thomas Chen. "Show her." The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "These are affidavits from psychiatric professionals stating that you've exhibited signs of severe emotional distress and possible dissociative disorder since your father's death. There's documentation of erratic behavior, paranoid ideation, and statements suggesting you might be a danger to yourself or others. With these, we can have you committed for evaluation. 72 hours minimum, possibly longer. Based on lies. Based on concern for your well-being." Edmund's voice carried false sympathy. "No one wants this, Lena. But you're clearly not in a state to make rational decisions. The recordings you think you have won't matter once a court rules you incompetent. Everything you've said will be dismissed as the ravings of a grief-stricken woman who couldn't handle the pressure." Lena looked around the table at faces that had smiled at her father's funeral, people who'd offered condolences and support while planning her destruction. "All of you, you all knew, you all helped him." "We all did what was necessary to protect the company," Graham said. "Your father was going to destroy everything with his moral crusading. He would have exposed the accounting adjustments, triggered investigations, tanked the stock price. 12,000 employees would have lost their jobs. Billions in shareholder value would have evaporated, all because he couldn't understand that sometimes the rules are too restrictive for real business to function. So you killed him." "I solved a problem." Graham's voice had gone cold, the mentor mask completely abandoned now. "Just like I'm solving the problem you've become. Your father made it easy. He was already stressed, already having cardiac symptoms from the chelation therapy we'd been adding to his coffee. One strong dose, a stressful confrontation, and his heart simply gave out. Natural causes. Tragic but unsurprising given his age and condition." There it was. The confession delivered with the casual arrogance of someone who believed he'd already won. In the van, Marcus was frantically documenting, capturing every word in multiple formats. But Caleb was focused on the elevator display, watching the numbers climb with agonizing slowness. 38th floor. 39th. Too slow. In the boardroom, Lena had recovered her composure, the panic replaced by something harder. "You're admitting you murdered my father." "I'm explaining reality to someone who needs to understand her situation." Graham smiled. "But since you've been so helpful as to record this conversation, let me be clear for your audience. Everything I've described is purely hypothetical, a scenario of what someone might have done if they were desperate enough and smart enough. I'm not confessing to anything except trying to help a mentally unstable young woman understand why she needs treatment. The courts won't see it that way. The courts will see what our lawyers tell them to see. We have resources you can't imagine, political connections, judicial relationships, media influence. By the time we're done, you'll be a cautionary tale about grief and delusion, not a crusader for truth." He gestured to Patricia, who'd been silent throughout. "Call Dr. Morrison. Tell him we need an emergency psychiatric evaluation. Patricia reached for her phone, but before she could dial, an alarm started blaring. The boardroom lights flickered, and through the windows, Caleb saw emergency strobes activating in the hallway. "What the hell?" Edmund started. The boardroom door exploded inward. Not kicked, actual explosives, a small-shaped charge that blew the electronic lock without bringing down the wall. Caleb came through the smoke with his weapon raised, and the tableau froze like someone had hit pause on reality. "Step away from her," Caleb said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone trained to protect presidents. "Now." Graham's expression shifted through surprise to calculation to something approaching respect. "The driver. I should have known you'd be more than you appeared. Secret Service, retired, and I'm really tired of people trying to kill my passengers." Caleb kept his weapon trained on Graham while his eyes scanned the room, cataloging threats and exits. "Lena, come here." She moved around the table, putting distance between herself and Graham. Her face was pale, but composed, and Caleb saw in her eyes that she understood what came next. "You can't shoot all of us," Graham said calmly. "Don't need to shoot all of you. Just you." Caleb's finger rested along the trigger guard, the muscle memory of 1,000 training scenarios keeping his hand steady. Federal agents are already on their way. The recording Lena made was being transmitted to the FBI, the SEC, and 3 major news outlets. Everything you said, every admission you made, is already in their hands. You're done. Am I? Graham's smile never wavered. Because from where I'm standing, you just committed breaking and entering, assault on corporate security, and brandishing a weapon in a private business setting. You're not a federal agent anymore, Ward. You're just a driver with delusions of heroism. Maybe, but I'm a driver with a really good recording of you confessing to murder. A recording obtained through illegal surveillance, entrapment, coercion. Thomas Chen had recovered his lawyer instincts. Nothing you have will hold up in court. We'll have it suppressed before you can even file charges. Caleb heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. His 90 seconds were up, and now he had to make a choice. Stand here arguing while police arrived and complicated everything, or get Lena out while they still could. The decision was made for him when Marcus's voice came through his earpiece. "Caleb, we've got problems. Building security is mobilizing. You've got maybe 30 seconds before they breach your position." "Lena, we're leaving." "You can't just—" Edmund started. "Watch me." Caleb grabbed Lena's arm, already backing toward the shattered doorway. "Anyone follows us, anyone tries to stop us, and I start shooting. We clear?" The board members looked at Graham, waiting for instructions. For a long moment, the CFO just stared at Caleb with the expression of someone reassessing an opponent he'd underestimated. "Let them go," Graham said finally. "They have nowhere to run. And when the police hear that a mentally unstable woman and her armed accomplice broke into our boardroom making wild accusations, it'll just confirm everything we've been saying about her competency." Caleb didn't wait to hear more. He pulled Lena into the hallway, toward the emergency stairs instead of the elevator. Behind them, he could hear shouting, phones ringing, chaos spreading. They took the stairs 3 at a time, Caleb leading with his weapon while Lena clutched her portfolio like a lifeline. "Did we get it?" she gasped between floors. "Did we get enough?" "Marcus has everything, the full confession." "But Graham's right. They'll suppress it. They'll try." Caleb hit the 20th floor and heard footsteps echoing from below, building security closing in. "But we've got insurance they don't know about." They burst out onto the 15th floor, cutting through office space full of workers who stared in shock at the armed man and the disheveled woman running past. Caleb found another stairwell, descended to the parking garage, and there was Marcus with the van engine running. They piled in, and Marcus peeled out with enough speed to leave rubber on concrete. In the rearview mirror, security guards poured into the garage, but they were already gone, disappearing into Manhattan traffic. "Please tell me you got all of it," Lena said, struggling to breathe. Marcus held up a tablet showing waveforms and timestamps. Every word, audio and video. The confession, the threats, everything. "And you sent it where?" "FBI White Collar Crime Division, SEC Enforcement Bureau, and 3 journalists who've been investigating corporate fraud for years." Marcus's smile was grim. "Plus I uploaded encrypted copies to 4 different cloud servers with deadman switches. If anything happens to any of us, the files automatically get released to 100 media outlets. Caleb finally allowed himself to breathe. They'd done it. They'd gotten Graham on record admitting to murder, to embezzlement, to conspiracy. They'd gathered evidence too explosive to suppress, distributed too widely to contain. But as the adrenaline faded, reality set in. They'd just declared war on people with billions in resources and no moral constraints, people who'd killed before and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. "What now?" Lena asked quietly. Caleb looked at her, this woman who'd gone from gallery curator to conspiracy hunter in less than a week, and saw the same question in her eyes that he'd been asking himself for 3 years. How do you stay alive when the people hunting you have money, power, and absolutely nothing to lose? The answer came 3 hours later in the form of federal agents surrounding the safe house. Caleb saw them first, black SUVs taking positions at both ends of the block, plainclothes officers moving with the practiced coordination of people who'd done this 100 times. He had maybe 20 seconds before they breached the door, 20 seconds to decide whether to fight or surrender. "Marcus," he said quietly, "we've got company." Marcus looked out the window and swore. "FBI, at least a dozen agents." He turned to Lena. "Did you call them?" "No, but I thought that was the plan. Get the evidence to federal authorities and let them handle it." The plan was to control how they got it, not have them kick down our door before we're ready. Caleb moved to the window, assessing positions and firepower. "Either someone leaked our location, or they traced the transmissions you sent. Or Graham has enough connections to mobilize the FBI within hours." Lena's voice was tight with barely controlled fear. This could be a hit disguised as an arrest. Before anyone could respond, a voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is Special Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. We know you're inside. Come out with your hands visible. You have 2 minutes to comply." Caleb's mind raced through options, discarding each as quickly as it formed. They could run. Marcus probably had an exit strategy built into every safe house he used, but running meant looking guilty, and guilty people didn't get fair trials. They could fight, but that was suicide against FBI tactical teams. Or they could trust that somewhere in the federal bureaucracy, someone still cared about evidence and justice more than protecting billionaires. "We go out," he said. "Hands up, no weapons, full cooperation." "Are you insane?" Marcus was already reaching for a go-bag hidden under the couch. "We don't know who sent them or what they've been told. For all we know, Graham's already spun this as a kidnapping or corporate espionage. Then we correct the record, but we do it without giving them an excuse to shoot us." Caleb ejected the magazine from his weapon, cleared the chamber, and set the gun on the coffee table. "Lena, leave the portfolio here. They'll confiscate it anyway, and we have copies. The files are already in federal hands. Marcus sent them hours ago, remember?" Caleb met her eyes. "This is the part where we trust the system, or at least trust that we've made the evidence too public to bury." Lena's hands shook as she set down the portfolio, but she nodded. Marcus hesitated a moment longer, then joined them at the door, his expression suggesting he thought they were making a terminal mistake. Caleb opened the door with his hands raised. "We're coming out, unarmed and compliant." The agents moved with textbook precision, separate them, pat them down, cuff them before anyone could reconsider. Caleb found himself face down on the hood of an SUV, while hands efficiently searched him for weapons. Beside him, Lena was being handled with only slightly more gentleness, and Marcus was arguing with an agent about unlawful detention. "Caleb Ward?" A woman's voice carrying authority and something that might have been curiosity. "Former Secret Service?" Caleb turned his head enough to see her, late 40s, sharp eyes, and a no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse and lie a suspect could offer. "Yes, ma'am." "Special Agent Chen, I need you to answer a question, and I need you to be very honest with me." She moved closer, studying his face. "Did you kidnap Lena Fairmont?" "What?" "No, I'm protecting her." "From what?" "From the people who murdered her father and tried to kill her twice in the last week." Caleb met her gaze steadily. "Did you receive the files we transmitted? The evidence of embezzlement and murder at Fairmont Industries?" "We received several encrypted files from an anonymous source, currently under review." Chen's expression gave nothing away. "We also received a call from Fairmont Industries' legal counsel, claiming that their CEO had been kidnapped by a former federal agent suffering from PTSD and delusions of conspiracy. They provided psychiatric evaluations suggesting Ms. Fairmont is experiencing a severe breakdown and may be a danger to herself. That's bullshit, Lena's voice carried from the other SUV. They're trying to discredit us before you can verify the evidence. Did you even look at the files? Did you see the confession we recorded? Miss Fairmont, I'm going to need you to calm down. Don't tell me to calm down. My father was murdered. Someone put poison in my champagne. They blew up a car trying to kill us. And now you're treating me like I'm the criminal? Agent Chen's expression softened fractionally. I'm treating you like someone at the center of a very complicated situation that I don't fully understand yet, which is why you're all coming to federal headquarters for questioning, voluntarily, I hope. It wasn't really a question, but Caleb understood the subtext. Cooperate now, or get arrested and lose any goodwill they might have built by surrendering peacefully. We'll cooperate, he said, but I want to go on record right now. Everything we did was to expose a criminal conspiracy. We have evidence, we have testimony, and we have a recording of Graham Kessler confessing to murder. Then I look forward to hearing it. Chen gestured to her team. Transport them separately. I want statements from each before they have a chance to coordinate stories. The FBI field office in Manhattan was exactly as institutional as Caleb remembered from his Secret Service days. Fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sick, furniture designed for discomfort rather than aesthetics, and the particular smell of burnt coffee and broken dreams that seemed to permeate every federal building. They separated him from Lena and Marcus immediately, putting him in an interview room that was probably supposed to be intimidating, but mostly just felt tired. Caleb had been on the other side of this table enough times to know the psychology, make them wait, let anxiety build, create the impression that you already know everything and are just waiting for them to confirm it. He waited 2 hours before Agent Chen finally walked in carrying a tablet and 2 cups of coffee. She set one in front of him and took the seat across, her expression professionally neutral. Your story checks out, she said without preamble. Parts of it, anyway. You were Secret Service, exemplary record until you resigned 3 years ago. Your wife died in a single car accident that was ruled accidental but had some anomalies in the investigation. You've been working as a driver since then, no criminal record, good reputation with your employer. And Lena Fairmont? Gallery curator turned reluctant billionaire. Father died 6 weeks ago from what was officially ruled a heart attack. She inherited controlling interest in Fairmont Industries and by all accounts has been struggling with the transition. Chen took a sip of her coffee. Now, where the story gets interesting is what happened at the Cartwright Gala. We pulled security footage, saw you assault Miss Fairmont in front of 200 witnesses. I saved her life. By forcing a kiss on her and drinking champagne that was allegedly poisoned. Chen's tone suggested skepticism. Except when we tested the remnants of that champagne, we found nothing. No poison, no toxins, nothing except expensive alcohol and your DNA. Caleb felt ice settle in his stomach. That's impossible. I felt the effects. Burning, blistering, cardiac symptoms. Marcus Chen treated me for exposure. Marcus Chen, unlicensed medical practitioner who's been on our radar for providing health care to people who don't want official records of their injuries. Chen pulled up something on her tablet. Did it occur to you that he might have his own reasons for claiming you were poisoned? That maybe this whole conspiracy was manufactured to give you and Ms. Fairmont a reason to access company files you had no legal right to see? No, that's not... Caleb stopped himself, recognizing the trap. She was testing him, looking for inconsistencies or anger that would suggest guilt. The waiter, the man who served the champagne, your footage must show him. We have footage of a man matching the description you provided entering and exiting the building. But without a clear facial shot, we can't identify him. And the catering company has no record of anyone who wasn't on their official roster. Chen leaned forward. So either this was an incredibly sophisticated conspiracy involving fake employees and untraceable poison, or you misread a situation and escalated it based on paranoia. What about the car bomb? Are you saying we imagined that too? The car bomb was real. Killed a vehicle registered to the car service you work for. But here's the thing. We can't find any evidence it was specifically targeting you or Ms. Fairmont. The timer suggests it was set to detonate around shift change when the garage would be full of people. Could have been targeting anyone in that building. Caleb felt the ground shifting beneath him, every piece of evidence that had seemed solid suddenly becoming questionable. You're saying this could all be coincidence? I'm saying that so far the only crime I can prove is that you broke into Fairmont Industries, assaulted security, and held board members at gunpoint. Chen's expression was hard. That's felony breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, and unlawful imprisonment. You're looking at serious prison time unless you can give me something concrete. The recording. Graham Kessler's confession. We have a recording of a hostile confrontation where a man was clearly being baited into making inflammatory statements while under duress from an armed assailant. His lawyers are already arguing it's inadmissible, obtained through coercion and illegal surveillance. Chen set down her tablet. Mr. Ward, I want to believe you. The financial records you provided show irregularities that warrant investigation. But irregularities aren't proof of crime, and everything else you've claimed is circumstantial at best. Then why are we here? If you think this is all paranoia and illegal evidence, why bring us in instead of arresting us? Chen was quiet for a moment, studying him with an intensity that suggested she was making a calculation. Because 20 years in this job has taught me that where there's this much smoke, there's usually fire. And because 30 minutes ago, we received information that changes things. She pulled up a new file on her tablet, turned it so Caleb could see. It was a photograph, grainy security footage showing a man in a white coat entering a building Caleb didn't recognize. This was taken 6 weeks ago at a private medical facility in Connecticut. The man in the photo is Dr. Raymond Morrison, a psychiatrist who specializes in cognitive disorders and competency evaluations. Guess who he was visiting? Caleb studied the photo, saw a second figure partially visible in the frame. Robert Fairmont. 2 days before he died. According to the facility's records, Dr. Morrison was there to evaluate Mr. Fairmont's mental state at the request of the Fairmont Industries Board. They were concerned about his decision-making, wanted professional assessment of his competency to continue running the company. Chen's voice had gone harder. Except Robert Fairmont never agreed to any evaluation. And Dr. Morrison's report, which was filed with the board but not shared with Mr. Fairmont or his family, concluded that he was showing signs of paranoid ideation and recommended he step down immediately. They were building a case to remove him. Or they were documenting legitimate concerns about his mental health. Either way, it's suspicious timing. Chen swiped to another image, Dr. Morrison again, this time in a much more recent photo. This was taken this morning, Dr. Morrison arriving at Fairmont Tower, presumably to evaluate Ms. Fairmont using the same criteria he applied to her father. Caleb's jaw tightened. Graham mentioned a doctor. Morrison in the boardroom said they'd need a psychiatric evaluation, which suggests a pattern. Father gets declared incompetent, dies shortly after. Daughter inherits, starts asking questions, gets targeted for the same treatment. Chen met his eyes. I'm starting to think your conspiracy theory might not be as crazy as it sounds. So what happens now? Now we do our jobs properly. We investigate the financial irregularities. We interview everyone involved in Robert Fairmont's competency evaluation. And we build a case that'll actually hold up in court. She paused. But that takes time. Weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime, Graham Kessler and his associates are free to continue whatever they've been doing, including killing anyone who threatens them. I can offer you protective custody, safe house, federal protection, complete anonymity until we're ready to move. Caleb thought about Mia, about 3 years of trying to build a quiet life that kept her safe from exactly this kind of danger. Protective custody meant disappearing, meant pulling her out of school and away from everything familiar, meant teaching a 7-year-old that the world was dangerous and the people who were supposed to protect you sometimes failed. I have a daughter, he said quietly. She's already lost her mother. I can't... His voice caught. I can't do that to her. Chen's expression softened. Then help me build this case fast. Tell me everything you know, every detail you've uncovered. Give me enough to get warrants, to freeze assets, to move before they can destroy evidence or flee. And Lena is in another room having a very similar conversation. If she's willing to testify, if she'll let us examine her father's files and corroborate your account, we might be able to move quickly enough to matter." Caleb made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. "All right, I'll tell you everything, but first I need to know, are we under arrest?" "Not yet. That depends on what you tell me and whether it's enough to justify the laws you broke getting it." For the next 3 hours, Caleb talked. He laid out the timeline starting with the Cartwright Gala, walking Chen through every threat and attack and revelation. He explained Robert Fairmont's hidden files, the evidence of embezzlement, the slow poisoning that had masqueraded as cardiac symptoms. He described Teresa Vaughn's testimony about cooked books and fired employees, Edmund Cartwright's complicity, and Graham Kessler's casual confession in a boardroom that was supposed to be his final victory. Chen listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes, but mostly just absorbing the flood of information. When Caleb finally finished, she sat back with the expression of someone who'd just realized a case was much bigger and more complicated than she'd anticipated. "This is going to be a nightmare to prosecute," she said. "Multiple jurisdictions, interstate commerce, potential SEC violations, and at least 2 murders if we can prove Robert Fairmont and your wife were both killed." "My wife?" Chen pulled up another file, and Caleb's breath caught. It was Sarah's accident report, the one he'd read so many times he had it memorized. But there were new pages attached, analysis he'd never seen, questions about brake line integrity and steering mechanism failure that had never made it into the official conclusion. "When we started digging into your background, we took another look at this. Had our forensics team review the original investigation." Chen's voice was gentle. "They found irregularities, signs of possible tampering that were dismissed at the time as coincidental damage from the crash. But if someone wanted to kill a Secret Service agent's wife and make it look accidental, this is exactly how they do it." Caleb couldn't breathe. 3 years of grief and guilt and wondering, 3 years of telling himself it was just tragedy and not murder, and now this woman was telling him his worst fear had been justified all along. "Why?" His voice came out raw. "Why would anyone want Sarah dead? She was a teacher. She had nothing to do with corporate conspiracies or embezzlement." "That's what we need to figure out. But Mr. Ward, Caleb, I think you already know the answer. You were Secret Service. You protected people who had enemies. You saw things, knew things, had access to information that could be valuable or dangerous depending on who wanted it." Caleb thought back to those final months before Sarah's death. He'd been on protective detail for a visiting foreign dignitary, routine assignment that had turned complicated when credible threats emerged. There'd been late nights and heightened security, and a lot of people asking questions he couldn't answer because of clearance levels and protocol. And then Sarah had died, and he'd left the service to raise Mia, and he'd never connected the two events because the pain of losing his wife had been too overwhelming to allow for conspiracy theories. "You think someone killed her to get to me?" "I think it's possible, and I think whoever did it didn't expect you to quit. They expected you to stay in the service, maybe take risks you wouldn't normally take because you were grieving and angry. When you retired instead, I became a loose end that was easier to leave alone than to chase." Caleb felt something cold and focused settling into his chest, until I stumbled into Lena Fairmont's life and started asking questions again. Chen nodded slowly. "We need to look at everyone who had access to your detail assignments 3 years ago. Anyone who knew your wife's schedule, who could have had opportunity to tamper with her vehicle." Before Caleb could respond, there was a sharp knock on the door. Another agent stuck his head in, his expression urgent. "Chen, we've got a situation. Fairmont Industries just held a press conference." Chen swore and pulled up a live feed on her tablet. Graham Kessler stood behind a podium, looking appropriately grave and concerned, with the Fairmont Industries logo prominent behind him. "It is with deep sadness that I must inform you of a tragic situation involving Lena Fairmont, daughter of our late founder Robert Fairmont," Graham was saying, his voice carrying practiced sympathy. "Ms. Fairmont has been under tremendous stress since inheriting control of the company, and we now believe she may be experiencing a severe mental health crisis. Earlier today, she and an accomplice broke into our offices, made wild accusations against board members, and threatened employees with a firearm." "Son of a bitch," Caleb breathed. "We are working with law enforcement to ensure Ms. Fairmont receives the help she needs," Graham continued. In the meantime, the board has voted unanimously to assume operational control of Fairmont Industries until such time as Ms. Fairmont is deemed competent to resume her responsibilities. We ask for privacy during this difficult time and for the public to remember that mental illness is not a crime. It's a tragedy that requires compassion and professional treatment. The feed showed reporters shouting questions, but Graham was already walking away, his expression suggesting the matter was closed. Chen turned off the tablet. He just moved. Used your break-in as justification to remove Lena from power and paint her as unstable. By tomorrow morning, every news outlet will be running stories about the troubled heiress who couldn't handle her father's legacy. We have to stop him. With what? We don't have enough for an arrest warrant yet. The evidence you provided needs to be verified. Witnesses need to be interviewed. Financial forensics takes time. We don't have time. Caleb stood, frustration and fury making it impossible to sit still. Graham's moving because he knows we're close. He'll destroy evidence, pay off witnesses, maybe even flee the country before you can build your perfect case. Then what do you suggest? That I arrest him based on a coerced confession and financial records that could be explained away? That I charge him with murder based on your suspicions about poison that we can't prove existed? Chen's voice rose. I want to stop him too, but I need evidence that'll actually convict him, not just create headlines. Caleb was about to respond when his phone buzzed. Not the burner Marcus had given him, but his personal phone, which the FBI had confiscated and he'd just gotten back. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. Attachments are time-sensitive. He pulled up his email app, and there it was, a message from an encrypted address with 3 attachments. The first was a photograph of a man Caleb recognized, Edmund Cartwright, meeting with someone in what looked like a parking garage. The second was a bank statement showing a transfer of $15 million from a Cayman Islands account to Cartwright's personal holdings. And the third was a video file. Caleb opened the video, and Sarah's face filled the screen. He nearly dropped the phone. It was Sarah, alive and smiling, sitting in what looked like a cafe. The timestamp showed 3 years ago, 2 weeks before her death. She was talking to someone off camera, her expression animated in the way it got when she was excited about something. I can't believe it, she was saying. I mean, I knew corporate corruption was real, but this is massive. If what you're telling me is true, if these people have been stealing billions, it's true. The off-camera voice was male, familiar in a way that made Caleb's skin crawl. And they'll do anything to protect it, which is why you can't tell anyone. Not your husband, not your friends, no one. But Caleb could help. He's Secret Service. He knows how to... That's exactly why you can't tell him. If he starts investigating, they'll know. And they'll make sure he stops, permanently. A pause. I'm trusting you with this because you're smart and because I need someone outside the conspiracy to hold on to this information. But you need to be careful. These people are dangerous. The video ended. Caleb stared at the screen, his mind refusing to process what he'd just seen. Sarah had known. She'd known about corporate corruption and conspiracy, and someone had trusted her with information, and... He played the video again, this time focusing on the reflection in the cafe window behind Sarah. There, barely visible, was the face of the person she'd been meeting with. Robert Fairmont. Oh, God, Caleb whispered. Chen was reading over his shoulder, her expression growing grimmer with each second. Your wife knew Lena's father. They were in contact before both their deaths. She never mentioned it, never said anything about meeting him or about any investigation. Caleb's voice sounded distant even to his own ears. Why wouldn't she tell me? Because he told her not to, because he was trying to protect you both and ended up getting her killed instead. Chen grabbed the phone. I need to send this to our forensics team. If we can verify the video's authenticity, if we can prove Robert Fairmont was investigating the conspiracy before he died, and that your wife was involved, it connects everything. Caleb felt pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. Sarah dies in a convenient accident that stops Robert's outside investigation. Robert continues alone but more carefully, documents everything, and when he gets too close, they poison him. Then Lena inherits, and they try to eliminate her before she can pick up where her father left off. But who sent you this video? Who has access to 3-year-old footage and current bank records? The answer came in another text. Teresa Vaughn. I wasn't completely honest about why I quit. Robert Fairmont gave me these files before he died, told me to only release them if something happened to him and his daughter. I've been sitting on them for 6 weeks, terrified. But after today, after seeing what they're doing to Lena, I can't stay silent anymore. More files coming. Use them to bury Graham Kessler. Over the next hour, Teresa's emails kept arriving. Bank statements showing systematic embezzlement going back 5 years. Internal memos discussing the Fairmont problem and strategies for removing him from power. Medical records detailing the chelation therapy that had been added to Robert's daily coffee under the guise of nutritional supplements. And finally, a recording, scratchy and distant but audible, of Graham Kessler and Edmund Cartwright discussing Sarah Ward's accident with the casual detachment of people discussing a business transaction. She was asking too many questions, Graham's voice said. Robert brought her in as his outside investigator, and she was getting close to the shell companies. We couldn't risk her finding the connection to Cartwright's real estate deals. So you had her killed? Edmund's tone was flat, neither approving nor condemning. I had a problem solved. Her husband was Secret Service, too visible to approach directly. But his wife? A teacher with a predictable schedule and a car old enough that tampering wouldn't be immediately obvious. Simple solution. And Ward didn't investigate? He tried. We made sure the local police shut it down quickly, ruled it accidental. He was too grief-stricken to push harder, and when he resigned from the service, the threat neutralized itself. The recording continued, but Caleb couldn't hear it anymore through the roaring in his ears. They'd killed Sarah. They'd murdered his wife to protect their embezzlement scheme, and he'd spent 3 years believing it was random tragedy when it had been calculated murder all along. Chen was talking, calling in other agents, issuing orders about warrants and arrests. But Caleb was moving on autopilot, his body functioning while his mind tried to process grief and rage that had been deferred for 3 years. Caleb. Chen's hand on his shoulder brought him back. I need you to stay here. We're moving on Graham Kessler and Edmund Cartwright now, but this has to be done right. I can't have you anywhere near the arrests. I want to be there when you take him down. I know. But you're too close to this, too personally involved. One wrong move, one moment where your emotions override your judgment, and defense lawyers will use it to discredit everything. Her expression was sympathetic but firm. Let us do our jobs. Let us get justice for your wife and Robert Fairmont and everyone else these people have hurt. Caleb wanted to argue, wanted to demand the right to see Graham Kessler's face when the handcuffs went on. But he knew Chen was right. He'd broken enough laws already. Better to let the system work the way it was supposed to trust that the evidence would be enough. What about Lena? Is in protective custody for her own safety. Once we've secured the arrests, once Graham and his associates are in federal detention, she'll be free to reclaim her company and her life. Chen paused. You saved her, Caleb. You saw the threat everyone else missed, and you put yourself between her and killers who'd already proven they wouldn't hesitate. That matters. It didn't feel like it mattered. It felt like he'd been stumbling through the dark, making desperate choices and hoping they'd add up to something that resembled justice. But he nodded, accepting the dismissal. They kept him at federal headquarters for another 6 hours while warrants were executed and arrests were made. Caleb sat in a conference room with terrible coffee and cable news showing breaking coverage. FBI raids on Fairmont Industries, executives being let out in handcuffs, legal experts speculating about charges and evidence. Marcus found him there around midnight, looking exhausted but satisfied. They got 7 board members, Graham's entire inner circle, and Edmund Cartwright, froze their assets, seized company records, the works. It's going to be the corporate fraud case of the decade. And Lena? Holding up better than expected. She's giving her statement now, walking them through everything her father documented. By morning, the narrative Graham tried to push about her being unstable will be completely reversed. Marcus sat down heavily. We did it, Caleb. We actually did it. Sarah's dead because of them. Caleb's voice was hollow. 3 years I've been raising Mia alone, telling her that her mother's death was an accident, that sometimes bad things just happen, and it was murder. Calculated, cold-blooded murder. I know, and I'm sorry. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Are you going to tell Mia? Someday, when she's old enough to understand. Caleb rubbed his face. Right now, I just want to see her, hold her, remember why I survived all this. They released him an hour later with instructions to remain available for additional questioning and a court date that was still being determined. Caleb went straight to Mrs. Chen's apartment, where Mia was asleep on the couch with her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in both arms. Mrs. Chen met him at the door with worried eyes. The news is saying terrible things about you, that you broke into buildings and threatened people. I was protecting someone, trying to stop bad people from hurting anyone else. Like you tried to protect Sarah? The question hit harder than any accusation could have. Mrs. Chen had known Sarah, had watched Mia when they needed date nights or emergency coverage. She'd been at the funeral, had helped Caleb navigate those first impossible months of single parenthood. I failed Sarah, Caleb said quietly. But I didn't fail Lena Fairmont, and that has to count for something. Mrs. Chen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Take your daughter home, Caleb. She missed you. He carried Mia to the car, her small body warm and solid against his chest. She stirred slightly but didn't wake, trusting completely that her father would keep her safe. That trust felt like both a gift and a burden, the weight of responsibility that had kept him moving through 3 years of grief. At home, he tucked Mia into bed and sat in the chair beside her, watching her sleep and thinking about all the ways his life had changed in a week. He'd gone from invisible driver to federal witness, from grief-stricken widower to someone who'd helped bring down a conspiracy that had killed at least 2 people and stolen hundreds of millions. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for everything, for seeing the threat, for saving my life, for believing me when no one else would. My father would have liked you. L. Caleb stared at the message for a long time before responding. Your father was trying to protect all of us. He succeeded. Rest now. You've earned it. He didn't expect a reply, but one came anyway. So have you. And Caleb? About your wife. I found something in my father's files, a letter he wrote but never sent. I'm having it delivered to you tomorrow. He wanted you to know the truth, even if he didn't live long enough to tell you himself. The letter arrived the next morning via courier, a single page in Robert Fairmont's precise handwriting, dated 2 weeks before his death. Dear Mr. Ward, we've never met, but I knew your wife. Sarah came to me 6 months ago with concerns about financial irregularities she'd noticed while helping a friend with accounting questions. I made the terrible mistake of trusting her with information that put her life in danger. By the time I realized how ruthless my enemies were, it was too late. Her death is a weight I will carry to my grave, which, if you're reading this, came sooner than I'd hoped. I want you to know that Sarah was brave and brilliant and absolutely refused to let injustice stand. She knew the risks of helping me investigate the conspiracy, and she chose to help anyway because she believed in doing what was right even when it was dangerous. Her death was not your fault. It was mine for involving her, and it was the fault of evil men who value money more than human life. If I succeed in stopping them, this letter will never reach you because I'll deliver it in person, along with an apology I can never adequately express. But if I fail, if they manage to silence me as they silenced Sarah, then please know this. The evidence I've gathered, the documentation I've left for my daughter, all of it is dedicated to getting justice for Sarah and for everyone else these people have harmed. Your wife died trying to expose corruption. Don't let her death be meaningless. Help Lena finish what Sarah and I started. With deepest regrets, Robert Fairmont Caleb read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. Sarah had been brave. She'd been trying to do the right thing, and he'd never known, had never gotten the chance to tell her he understood, to tell her that her courage had mattered. Daddy, why are you crying? Mia stood in the doorway, her rabbit trailing from one hand. Caleb wiped his eyes and pulled her into his lap. I'm crying because I'm sad and happy at the same time, he said. Sad because I miss Mommy. Happy because I just learned something new about her, that she was helping people, trying to stop bad guys. Like superheroes? Exactly like superheroes. Mommy was brave and she was fighting to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Mia thought about this seriously. Did she win? Caleb looked at his daughter's earnest face and made a choice. Not by herself, but she started something important, and other people finished it for her. So yes, in the end, the good guys won. Good. Mia hugged him tight. I want to be brave like Mommy when I grow up. You already are, sweetheart. You already are. The next 3 weeks were a blur of depositions, grand jury testimony, and media coverage that turned Caleb and Lena into unlikely heroes. Graham Kessler was indicted on 17 counts, including murder, conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, and fraud. Edmund Cartwright faced similar charges, and the entire Fairmont Industries board was facing civil suits and criminal investigation. Teresa Vaughn was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony, and the accounting department she'd worked in was gutted and rebuilt under federal oversight. Dr. Morrison lost his medical license and was facing charges of conspiracy for his role in the competency evaluations. Through it all, Caleb tried to maintain some semblance of normal life for Mia. He went back to work at the car service, though his boss kept assigning him high-profile clients who specifically requested the driver who took down a billionaire. He declined most of them, preferring the anonymity of regular routes and ordinary passengers. But normal was relative now. He'd been interviewed by federal prosecutors, profiled in national media, and offered book deals he had no intention of accepting. His quiet life was thoroughly shattered, and there was no putting the pieces back the way they'd been. Lena Fairmont reclaimed control of Fairmont Industries 3 weeks after the arrests, walking into the boardroom with federal agents clearing the way and cameras capturing every moment. She gave a statement about rebuilding the company with transparency and integrity, about honoring her father's legacy by doing what was right instead of what was profitable. Privately, she offered Caleb a position as head of security, a role that would pay significantly more than driving and would let him use the skills he'd been suppressing for 3 years. He turned it down, but not because he didn't appreciate the offer. "I need to be present for my daughter," he told Lena over coffee in a cafe far from the media circus. "I've spent 3 years trying to keep her safe by staying invisible, and it didn't work. Now I need to keep her safe by being there. Actually there, not just physically present while my mind's somewhere else watching for threats." "I understand." Lena wrapped her hands around her cup, looking younger without the weight of conspiracy pressing down on her. "But the offer stands. Whenever you're ready, whatever you need, you call me. You saved my life, Caleb. That's not a debt I'll ever be able to repay." "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone should have done." "But most people wouldn't have. Most people would have assumed the champagne was fine, that I was safe at a vetted charity gala, that threats don't come for billionaires in ballrooms." Her smile was sad. "You saw what others missed because you've lived through loss and you know how quickly everything can change." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Two people who'd been strangers 2 months ago and were now bound by shared trauma and unlikely victory. "What will you do now?" Caleb asked finally. "Rebuild. Make Fairmont Industries into the company my father dreamed it could be. Ethical, transparent, actually serving the employees instead of just enriching executives. It'll take years and I'll make mistakes, but..." She paused. "I have to try. For him. For everyone Graham hurt. You'll succeed. You're tougher than you think. I learned from the best." She stood, gathering her things. "Take care of yourself, Caleb, and if you ever change your mind about that job offer, you'll be the first to know." Graham Kessler's trial began 6 months later and lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, financial records, recordings, testimony from dozens of witnesses. Teresa Vaughn walked the jury through the accounting fraud with charts and spreadsheets that made the embezzlement undeniable. Medical experts explained how chelation therapy could mimic cardiac symptoms when administered in the right dosages. And Caleb testified about Sarah, about the video showing her meeting with Robert Fairmont, about the recording of Graham admitting to having her killed. The defense tried to discredit him, tried to paint him as a grief-stricken ex-agent with an agenda, but the evidence was too strong to dismiss. The jury deliberated for 7 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Graham Kessler was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Edmund Cartwright received 35 years. The other board members got varying sentences, but all of them would spend significant time in federal prison. Caleb watched from the gallery as the sentences were read, Lena sitting beside him and Mia at home with Mrs. Chen. He felt the weight of 3 years finally lifting, the knowledge that Sarah's death had been avenged and that Mia would grow up knowing her mother had been murdered by people who were now being held accountable. It didn't bring Sarah back. It didn't erase the grief or the years of raising their daughter alone. But it meant something. It meant Sarah's courage hadn't been wasted, that she'd been part of something bigger than either of them had realized. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with questions and cameras. Caleb ignored them, heading for his car with single-minded purpose. He had to pick up Mia from school, had promised to take her for ice cream and help with a science project about butterflies. His phone buzzed one last time as he pulled away from the curb. A message from Lena. "Thank you for everything. My father left me a company, but you gave me justice. That's a gift I'll never forget." Caleb didn't respond immediately. Instead, he drove to Mia's school and waited in the pickup line, watching children stream out with backpacks and laughter. When Mia spotted him, her face lit up with uncomplicated joy, and she ran to the car with her rabbit tucked under one arm. "Daddy, can we get chocolate ice cream?" "Absolutely. Whatever you want, sweetheart." As they drove toward the ice cream shop, Mia chattering about her day and the butterflies in her science book, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not happiness exactly, but possibility. The sense that maybe, finally, they could start building a future instead of just surviving the present. His phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from an unknown number with an attachment that made Caleb's blood run cold. It was a photograph, recent, taken with a telephoto lens showing Mia at her school playground. The message read, "Graham wasn't working alone. You destroyed one network, but others remain. Sarah knew too much, and now so do you. Watch your daughter carefully, Mr. Ward. Accidents happen to those who ask too many questions." Caleb pulled over, his hands shaking. He forwarded the message to Agent Chen immediately, his mind already cataloging threats and defensive measures. The conspiracy was bigger than they'd realized. There were more players, more danger, more people who thought silence could be bought with fear. But as he looked at Mia in the rearview mirror, still chattering about butterflies and ice cream flavors, Caleb made a decision. He'd spent 3 years invisible, 3 years hiding from a world that had taken his wife. He'd learned the hard way that invisibility didn't mean safety. It just meant being unprepared when danger found you anyway. So he wouldn't hide anymore, wouldn't shrink from threats or pretend the darkness couldn't reach him. Instead, he'd do what he should have done 3 years ago. Stand in the light, acknowledge the danger, and fight back with everything he had. Because Sarah had been brave. Lena had been brave. And Mia deserved a father who chose courage over fear, who taught her that sometimes the only way through was straight ahead, even when straight ahead looked terrifying. The darkness had found him, had found his daughter, had found the one person he loved more than safety or peace or his own life. And Caleb Ward, former Secret Service agent, grieving widower, father trying desperately to protect his child, was done hiding. He deleted the threatening message, put the car in drive, and headed for the ice cream shop. Later, he'd contact Agent Chen. Later, he'd figure out who was targeting his family and how to stop them. Later, he'd plan and prepare and do all the things his training had taught him. But right now, he had a daughter who wanted chocolate ice cream and had questions about butterflies. And those moments, those small, perfect moments of ordinary life, were worth fighting for. The story wasn't over. The threat remained. But for the first time in 3 years, Caleb wasn't facing it alone or running from it in fear. He was ready, and whatever came next, he'd meet it standing.